Council, if I can have your attention, please. So before we get the meeting underway, Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Christian asked for a brief moment. Councillor Shoemaker, we'll start with you because you asked first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On August 25th, which is next Saturday, there is a cultural market on James Street, the first ever cultural market on James Street from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's a community engagement event, so the hope is that this will be a great success and lead to many other events on James Street. There'll be food trucks, entertainment, and a lot of community partners there helped make this happen. New to the Sault, Social Services, Sault Ste. Marie Police Services, the Arts Council, and some local businesses as well. So there'll be a Facebook event posted in the next day or two. Look for it. It's the James Street Cultural Market, August 25th, 10 to 6. And if you want to know more, you can get in touch with Melissa Chelier at Social Services or with Constable Troy Miller at Sault Ste. Marie Police Services.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to planning and engineering who also helped that get underway, make that happen. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a message here. The city right now is conducting a business survey in Sault Ste. Marie with the help of the EDC and the Innovation Center. It was approved through City Council, so it's been underway for a couple of weeks now, and we've received several responses, but we'd like to hear from as many businesses in Sault Ste. Marie as possible, because the major focus of the survey is aimed at looking at city operations and what the city itself and its operations are doing to help local business, and also things that we should be doing to improve and help local business. So we encourage any business owner out there, or business manager who hasn't responded, to please contact the EDC at 705-759-5432, and please be part of the survey. The information is important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Madam Clerk.
Under Agenda Item 1, Adoption of Minutes, a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fada resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 16, 2018 be approved.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Carried. I apologize. Councillor Myers also asked to make a few comments, so if we can just pause right here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted you to take a moment because I was asked by a Ward 2 resident if we were going to be doing something to express our condolences to the city of Fredericton on the recent loss that they've had in their city. And it's my understanding, I believe, through the CAO that you will be sending a letter, as you've done with the Danforth tragedy and so on. So I thought you might want to take a moment and just speak to that on behalf of all of us.
Yeah, I was hoping the letter was going to be on tonight's council agenda, but I think it's just somewhere in the process of between my office and the council agenda. So I did write a letter on behalf of the City of Sault Ste. Marie to both Mayor Tory, City of Toronto, Mayor O'Brien, and the City of Fredericton, just expressing our condolences for the tragedies in their communities, also expressing our solidarity with them as we stand with their community as they deal with these challenges and as they move forward, and we all deal with the mental health issues that lead to these type of challenges and these type of tragedies, and also the gun violence that leads to these type of tragedies. I think they're really pressing issues. It's sad that we're seeing more of them in our country. And a number of you had reached out to me, and I had assured a number of you that we would be putting something together. I want to assure you that that's been done. I'm not sure if they've received it today, but if not, they'll be receiving it by tomorrow, and we'll make sure that the letter gets out to all of council. It's written on behalf of you and the city at large.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, if we can go to Section 3, please.
Declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.10, Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer, Bylaw 174, and also Bylaw 11.1.3, Bylaw 135, Traffic, Spouse employed by Police Services.
Councillor Grandinetti.
Consent item, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consent item 6.21 and bylaw 11.1.6. I own the abutting property. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker.
My iPad seems to have crashed, but it's the one about the commuter cycling fund program. I think, 6.15 I have noted here, because one of the parties who will be affected by that plan is a client of my law firm.
Okay. Any others, Council? Seeing none?
A motion by Councillors Myers and Bruni resolved that the agenda for August 13, 2018 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 5.1, the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers, Micheline Findlay and Stephen Mullins are in attendance.
So if I can have Micheline and Stephen just stand at the mic here so everybody can see you while I speak, and then we'll have you up here in a moment to receive your recognition. So, welcome to Council. This is a great celebration. On behalf of and at the request of the Governor General, it is my honor to present the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers to a pair of our local citizens, Micheline Findlay and Steve Mullins. The Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers recognizes the exceptional volunteer achievements of Canadians from across the country in a wide range of fields. As an official Canadian honor, the Medal for Volunteers incorporates and replaces the Governor General's Caring Canadian Award. The Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers builds on the legacy and spirit of the Caring Canadian Award by honoring the dedication and commitment of volunteers. It is one of our country's most prestigious awards, and tonight we recognize two well-deserving recipients, Micheline and Steve. Steve has dedicated over 30 years of volunteer service to the advancement of youth in Canada throughout organizations such as Scouts Canada. He's a cadet officer with the 155 Board and Grey GC Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron. He's also an active member of the Central United Church, where he helps improve the congregation's reach. Micheline has been helping those in need in her community and abroad for more than 15 years. She has participated in winter and holiday fundraising events, the Canadian Cancer Society's Relay for Life, and a twinning project between a school here in the Sioux and one in Kenya. She is a longtime local educator who has helped organize Franco-Ontario Day celebrations. Thank you to you both for your volunteerism, for your selfless efforts to help others, for setting a strong example for others to follow, and the care and kindness you have showed for your community and your fellow citizens. Your actions speak to our very best qualities, and our future will certainly be brighter if people follow your lead. I'd like you to both come forward to the front so I can present you with your medal. We've got some people want to take pictures here. And perhaps what we'll do is, before I put the medal on, you can stand right here. My left. Lisa's waiting.
Taking pictures of this, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine. Governor General will never ask me to do this again. There you go. Oh, we did it. Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize, before we leave this topic, we have Diane Marshall here with us tonight, who is also a recipient of this award and who's done a tremendous amount for our community. So thank you, Diane, for all you do. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 5.2, Rob Brewer, President and CEO of PUC Services, Inc., is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. Brewer. It's been great seeing you. Come back in September's council meeting too with something.
That was great. Yeah.
Welcome to council.
What a tough act to follow, though. That's. Yeah. So today I have with me Jordan Zinn, who I've forgotten to recognize the last 2 times I've been here, but he does exist. We've also got Kelly McClellan, who's our VP of Finance, Claudio Stefano, who's our VP Operations, and Jim Bonifero, who's our board chair. So good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. PUC is here to announce an exciting partnership we have with Fluence. Fluence is a Siemens and an AES company, and they specialize in energy storage. And this partnership is one of the many things that PUC is doing to support our strategic plan, to support growth through entrepreneurship, and to bring innovative solutions to both PUC and to the broader community, and to improve our customer care with respect to ensuring that our rates remain amongst the lowest in the province of Ontario. So this partnership is proposing to build the largest energy storage project in Canada. Want to hit the next one? Yeah. A project that will see significant energy cost savings for both our business and commercial customers, while also seeing a very significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And before we get too far into the presentation, I thought it'd be a good idea to help define some of the terms you'll hear. The first is global adjustment, or GA. Global adjustment is an amount that all Ontario electricity customers pay, and it's tied to the difference between the wholesale price of electricity on the market and the various costs to actually acquire, to maintain, and to promote conservation. For Class A customers, GA can represent up to 70% of the monthly bill. We'll reference Class A and Class B customers as well, and these are distribution-connected Class A and Class B customers. They're not transmission-connected. And these are customers like our hospitals, our colleges, our universities, and our large office buildings. And our Class B customers are our senior living homes, our malls, our hotels, and our small manufacturers. So Class A customers for us are those that have an average peak demand of over 1 megawatt and who choose to be Class A customer. CEMA, or a Customer Energy Management Program, is an initiative by PUC in partnership with Fluence, and its goal is to provide an energy solution which, for a community like Sault Ste. Marie, will result in significant Class A and Class B savings. And we're proposing a 45 megawatt, 165 megawatt hour energy storage facility, which will be the largest proposed facility in Canada. This will replace expensive peak generation with inexpensive off-peak generation and provides businesses with significant savings. It will make Sault Ste. Marie, as I mentioned, the most competitive business environment with respect to utility costs in Ontario. And CEMA will be connected at 8 different feeder locations in 2 distinct geographic locations across the city. We do this to provide both network redundancy and operational flexibility. The proposed storage facility will load during off-peak hours and will generate into the system during peak hours. The charging and the discharging system utilizes Siemens Intelligent Operating System, which helps to maximize program savings. From a business customer perspective, there's no upfront cost or fees, and there's no requirement for them to opt in or to opt out. All members of Class A and Class B will benefit from the savings. We've heard some questions as to why it's business customers that benefit instead of residential customers. And in this case, residential customers have benefited from the Fair Hydro Plan, which reduced bills across the province by 25% for residential customers. Business customers didn't get the same benefit. So through this innovative solution, PUC's been able to find some level of savings for business customers, again, like our hospitals and our colleges and our universities. Expected savings from the program are up to 20% for Class A customers and between 4 and 5% for Class B customers. SEMA, as proposed, will save businesses in Sault Ste. Marie between $3 and $5 million a year, which over the life of the project means almost $100 million in savings for businesses in Sault Ste. Marie. And in addition, and we feel that this is very critical to where PUC sits, it will result in almost 32,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide not being released into the air each year. And that's due to the load shifting for generation. That's the equivalent of almost 7,000 passenger vehicles being driven for an entire year. So our next steps are to work on getting the necessary approvals in place, starting the engineering work, and finally getting the project constructed. It's our hope to have the project operational in 2019. So I'm happy to take any questions on the project.
Councillor Christian.
I just have a comment, and I want to thank you for the presentation. I think it's clear over the last presentations from the PUC that we are really transforming right now. Pardon the pun. The PUC, to me, and I think it's clear, is becoming a strategic partner for the city of Sault Ste. Marie. I think that's really important. They're investing in our infrastructure. When people ask what the city is doing to invest in infrastructure, clearly the PUC is making a difference in that area. And they're doing projects that are making us, as a community, more competitive. They're creating a better competitive environment for existing businesses, and they're doing it at virtually no cost to the consumer, which is just tremendous. Aside from the fact that, we're reducing carbon emissions, which is important to all of us, they're creating an environment for organizations like the EDC and the Innovation Center to promote the idea that Sault Ste. Marie can be the lowest cost community to do business when it comes to electricity and power costs. The EDC has pointed out that one of the biggest concerns that prospective businesses that are investing or thinking of investing in Sault Ste. Marie is the cost of energy. Well, clearly this puts us at the forefront and gives us a huge competitive advantage. So it's exciting stuff, and I want to commend the PUC for their hard work and moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Again, we appreciate you coming, as the Mayor said, frequently to update us. Just a few questions. I have to echo Councillor Christian's comments about us thinking about the future. I'm a great believer in the future, so excellent. A couple of questions, though, starting with in California in 2017. California, San Diego, just outside San Diego, there is basically something similar, from my understanding. So the company that they have been using is AES Energy, which basically links into Siemens, which I'm happy to see because they've been up and running very successfully. And they basically built their batteries within 6 months. My first question, how long will this be up and running in your timelines?
So just to answer your question about San Diego, actually, that's we have a visit plan to talk to them about their lessons learned to make sure that any of the struggles that they had, that we don't have the same ones. So our intention is to actually be out there in September. With respect to timing, there's a couple hurdles we're trying to get through with respect to making sure we've got all the approvals in place. But in terms of the partnership and the financing, we seem to have all that there. So we're hoping to have it up and running for about May of next year, which would help us hit the coincident peaks, the peak days for 2019.
Okay. A few other questions. Just going back to California, it's my understanding that because of the, unfortunately, 2015, the natural gas spillage, they were even more excited to make this up and coming running fast. Going back to Siemens, are they coming up here? Will they be close as a partner and building with you, processing, taking you through each step?
So Fluence will be the constructor.
Okay.
Fluence is a Siemens and AES company.
Okay.
So Siemens will be assisting with respect to some of the logistics and the software and that type of thing. So they'll be an active partner through.
Okay. Also, I think I read in your report that there's no initial capital investment. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So what we're doing is PUC has set up or is in the process of setting up an entity that will purchase the capacity from this facility.
Okay.
And this facility will be built with private funds. And then over the life of the project, PUC will be providing that savings to customers, but we'll also be building up a reserve, which is the facility at the conclusion to it. So it's a nice win-win for all of us.
Definitely. And with regards to the capital cost, you've answered that. They were talking about, in another report, I went to IESO, which is an independent electricity system operator, and they were talking about the hourly Ontario energy prices and how it has a relationship with the GA. And can you elaborate on that? If the price of electricity changes, how is that going to impact the GA? Because it's my understanding that as electricity goes down, it could increase the GA. But I also understand with our batteries, it will basically wash out.
So that one's not necessarily a 30 seconds, so give me a couple minutes and I'll try to explain that one.
Well, you have a couple hours.
What you're referring to is the HEP, the HOEP, and that's the sort of spot electricity price. And we're seeing there certainly is a differential between that price and say what the price on the market is, or so that being the price, what it's being sold for through time of use or that type of thing. And that difference is what's captured in the GA. Okay. So if you look at, say, the wholesale price is 5 cents for a kilowatt hour, but the generation, including some of the renewables, is significantly more expensive than that. The difference is then captured in the GA. There's also some other things that feed into the GA, such as some of the significant refurbishments that are going on, along with some of the CDM programs. So the GA remains a sort of an influx number. It's calculated monthly. It will vary. In our modeling, we've assumed some conservative numbers for it. So even in the event that it's smaller than it currently is, I think we're still pretty safe.
You think so? Okay. And two other questions. Education is important. I know education is important for PUC. When you're talking to your Class A and Class B customers, how are you going to educate them on the benefits?
Well, we're going to have them have a credit at the bottom of their bill that tells them how much less they're paying. Okay. But we will certainly reach out to them and explain what we're doing. Okay. But from their perspective, they're going to have their traditional, and then there'll be a credit at the bottom that is the privilege of living in Sault Ste. Marie. Okay.
Because I know Class A, you already have that line about the GA and then the savings. And basically, I think it's absolutely the future, and I absolutely support it. And going back to California, the benefits they have received, they have been supporting houses up to 40,000 houses with their batteries, from my understanding. So, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Butland.
Yeah, I have 20 minutes of comments.
So it'd just be a shade under Councillor Hollingsworth then.
But a couple of questions before I get into those discussions. Oh, right, of course. Why did they come to Sault Ste. Marie, Mr. Brewer? Why did they pick Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, I think we've got a unique environment here with some renewable capacity. I think we've got a development-friendly city. I think both mayor and council have been very supportive of other energy initiatives. So I think this is certainly one that fits in that mold. We've got a smart energy strategy here, I think, that fits a lot of these sort of projects well. And so I think when developers look at Sault Ste. Marie, they see a fairly straightforward process in order to try to get some things built.
If I can add to that, because I had a conversation with Convergent. Convergent Energy did the battery storage project, the smaller battery storage project that we cut the ribbon on. Claudio, you were there maybe a year and a half ago?
Last summer.
Yeah, last summer. And when Convergent's executive was here, I took the opportunity to talk to them about their experience. And they said they were doing battery storage projects in a number of communities. And they told me that by far, ours was a really convenient community to do the project in. They had a great experience here with the PUC. They also said they had a great experience here with contractors who were assisting them with projects in other communities as a result of the project in the Soo. So I said, well, that's interesting. Who's that? And they told me a couple of the parties' names. So they were also at the ribbon cutting, so I approached them quietly and I said, is it true? Did you get a contract out in this city based on your work here? And they said, yeah. I walked up to the other person and said, did you get a contract out in this city based on your work here? And they said, yeah. So it's a great example of the importance of the PUC being an economic driver and really leveraging the capacity of our community. Because on that Convergent project, we had a company come in town, have a great experience, do the battery storage project, but with it, local contractors assisted, and then their expertise went out and helped with these type of projects in other communities, which I think is a real plus. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Well said. Last time you didn't tell us the total financial arrangements of the projects. I'm going to ask you directly. I've heard anywhere from $100 million to $150 million project that this is.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dwell on the financial component thereof, but to construct it, is there going to be a lot of local labor, I would assume?
I think that's safe to say. The reason why you'll see the ranges is because there's been, the lithium ion market is significantly more competitive than it was, say, 3 years ago, to the battery market. So the cost of the inputs has been coming down significantly. We think this one probably is under 100 million, all said and done. But certainly if this had been constructed 2 or 3 years ago, it probably would have been closer to the top of the range you mentioned.
And how many, in the absence of Mr. Krumpatich, how many workers might be engaged in this? A bit too early.
I think it's probably a little bit too early, but certainly the construction of it would require a substantial number of people.
I'll have comments at the appropriate time, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Butland.
Oh.
It's appropriate now.
It's
It's appropriate now. I don't think we have a whole lot more questions for Mr. Brewer. I have you, Councillor Brady.
okay. Look, council, staff, residents, this is a major development for Sault Ste. Marie. And 10 years ago, we had ourselves declared the alternative energy capital of North America. Felt a little cheesy at the time, but maybe we've come to that point because this is the largest in North America, energy storage. And worldwide, 2% of energy is stored. So we are definitely at the forefront. Followed by, very quickly after the smart grid project that you brought forward. And I'm told this is the most impactful smart grid project, once again, in Ontario for sure, and probably Canada. So we're at the cutting edge, folks. We're at the cusp of something, I think, very, very big. Now, 10 years ago, we brought a strategy together, a consultant's report, and they talked about smart grid. So at least there was one aspect of that study that we completed. But we really need to take this forward. We talk about diversification. What an opportunity that nobody else has, but we've got to grasp it, and we've got to take it forward. Tell the world because of who we are. I was talking to Mr. Martin today, and he said, thanks to the Smart Grid project in Sault Ste. Marie, we're going to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and they're very eager to move forward. So let's tell people what we're doing here. And I'm also pressed him, Mr. Mayor, you talked about this, saying this Center of Excellence, calls it CENEX, whatever that is, but the Center of Excellence, very, very important. And house all of the different aspects of what we've got, and a model that we can show people when they come to Sault Ste. Marie. We've got to invite them, but we've also got to tell them. So thank you, Mr. Brewer. Thank you for seeing your staff. Thanks to our two board members, the mayor and Mr. Christian. I think we're putting this forward. And I'm going to say thanks to Dominic Perella. He's not as fast as I would want him to be, but he never said, no, we're not going to do this. So it has come to fruition, and it's, yeah, I can't say it enough. Be proud. Any naysayers out there, get aside, folks. I really believe this city's on the cusp of something. through Noront, and when the dark cloud over Algoma is lifted, smart grid, energy storage, all of these things, I think, hold us in good stead for the immediate future and the distant future. And next week, I understand we'll be talking about steel. Sault Ste. Marie will remain a steel city, and we need to be very, very proud of that. But this is a new direction for us, and we need to take it with a lot of gusto and aggression. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Brewer, for your presentation. Excellent idea. It'll be a great project for the Sioux. Just a couple questions. In the report, it says life cycle. So can you explain the life cycle? Is it 30 years?
20-year life cycle.
It's a 20-year life cycle?
Yeah.
And then what happens then?
Well, it carries forward, but you do your modeling based on a certain time frame. You model the requirement for replacing batteries. When you're using lithium ion, they have a lifespan that's variable. So you assume that you're going to have some replacements throughout, and you build it over a term, and that's how you sort of create your financial model. So the financial model for this was based on a 20-year lifespan.
And will it be in one storage facility, or will it be several?
So the intention is to have 2 different locations.
Do we have them identified?
We would like to have, we have them identified, but without getting into specifics, we haven't necessarily secured all the rights to those areas. But
okay.
The idea is to have them located strategically. So one near a transmission station, so it's got the ability to basically feed through the whole system, and the other in a very critical infrastructure area, so that we could potentially provide some redundant.
And my last question, you have Class A, Class B. Could we ever have Class C for the residents?
We could. I think the residents will benefit.
What would it take?
Well, I think that if we find our businesses are more competitive, I think our residents are going to do awful well just based on the fact that there's a healthy business environment here. But we're doing everything we can to keep our residents' bills as low as possible as well. Things like smart grid achieves a significant savings along with boosting reliability significantly. This gives us a lot of flexibility within our system to maintain higher rates of reliability as well. And certainly, depending on what the pricing model looks like on a go-forward basis for residential customers, this may make a lot of sense for residences at some point. The current way that the time of use rates are set, the financial doesn't work as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to ask a question and make a comment through you to Rob. I think in your presentation you had mentioned that it could be up to $100 million of savings for businesses in Sault Ste. Marie over the term. And I guess that I wanted to confirm that I understood that correctly. And I also want to just have council, and for the benefit of the public, stop for a moment and think about, certainly during this term on council, it's come up a number of times about industrial tax rates and other segments of our tax rates and the base in our community. And we've tried to make the point a number of times that while we try to get there and be friendly to business and industry in our community, you can only slice the pie up so many ways. And if we shift it from one sector, we're shifting on to another sector. So the solution is not to necessarily try to change the burden. The solution is to try to find other means of helping business. And I think this is an excellent example of, as we do have a good open environment, and I think this council's worked hard at trying to provide an open for business messaging. You've confirmed that's been said, Mr. Mayor. You've talked about it in the other contractors getting jobs out of our community, and so on. So I think that this is a really good example and a time for us to step back and pause and think about there's different ways to deal with our issues, and where we are geographically presents other opportunities. There's maybe some challenges too, but it's also opportunities. And this one, I think, is so exciting for all the reasons that my friend over here said, but also that as we face these factors like a tax rate, there's other ways of tackling that, and this is a really good example. So, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted that point to be made, that by saving business $100 million in hydro and also making it a selling point for people like the EDC, that goes, I think, further than what shifting a burden within our community to another sector of our community would do. Thank you. I just want to make that point.
Thank you. Councillor Fada.
Mayor, and I just wanted to ask you if you can remind us if the federal multi-billion-dollar infrastructure funding was approached in terms of helping to finance this project?
There's no requirement for external funding on this one. We certainly, as we get the plans in place, there will be some applications put forward, but the funding model does not require any funding.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So listen, I just want to end with an acknowledgement and a thank you. We have Jim Boniferro here, and we have Claudio's here too, and Rob Reed was a director at the PUC, and I want to thank obviously you, Mr. Brewer. Early in my term as the mayor, I came to the PUC, Claudia was there, Jim was there, and we sat down and we said, the PUC has to be more than just a company that delivers water and power. We have very few assets as a municipality, and we have to maximize the value of the assets we have, and we have to drive innovation not only through the municipality, but through our assets. In a very short period of time, we put 2 very substantial projects in the book, which make our community a leader, and really which help us move forward, diversify our economy, and create a competitive business environment. None of that would have happened without the support of council. None of that would have happened without the support of Councillor Christian at the PUC board. And it's really important to recognize that none of that would have happened without the leadership of the PUC board itself. So I want to thank Jim Boniferro and the board for keeping in mind and talking about the community interest. Because as a director there, it could be very easy just to talk about the responsibilities of the PUC, but those folks didn't. Those folks took a broader view and a broader perspective, and I think it's really shows. And then nothing gets done at the board level without good staff. So Claudio, Rob, Jordan, and your team, and we have your VPs here, now your VP of Finance is here. I'm sorry I didn't see you up there. Thank you for doing what you're doing and also being mindful of the community, because you folks can go to work every day and just focus on delivering water and power, and you're not doing that. You're going to work every day and you're saying, how do we improve our community? And the community at large over the last couple of meetings has seen what we've been working on for the last couple of years. And I'm proud to have been a part of it, and I thank you for it.
Thank you.
Staff, there's no resolution for that. It was just for information. They don't need our approval. So, thank you. Madam Clerk, I think we're going to call up item 8. So we have a delegation here. Yes? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, on item 8, I have a conflict as well that I missed because my iPad wasn't working, but it's because one of the main proponents is a client of my law firm.
Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker's conflicted on item 8. Okay, so Council, I'm just going to walk you through the process on item 8, just so we're all straight. Item 8 is a notice of motion to reconsider. So in accord with our procedural bylaws, a reconsideration doesn't happen at the meeting that it's brought, it happens at the following meeting. But we want to deal with this matter tonight to give staff some instructions. So what we need to do is we first need to move to suspend our rules of procedure so we can deal with the reconsideration tonight as opposed to dealing with the reconsideration in September. So I need a mover and a second for that. I had Councillor Myers move that and Councillor Fada agree to second it. So all in favor to want any debate on suspending our rule of procedures? Does anybody have any comments or debate on that? Seeing none, all in favor of suspending the rules of procedure? Okay, so we can deal with the reconsideration then tonight. So understand that the first motion is just a debate to reconsider, right? It's not, you're not talking about the merits of in this case, it's about a bike path versus or a path versus a sidewalk. You're not talking about that. You're just talking about the merits of reconsidering. So we have a motion to reconsider. That motion was moved by Councillor Bruni, seconded by Councillor Huppinen. I'm going to have the clerk read the motion to reconsider. Then we'll have debate on reconsidering.
Whereas by council resolution passed on July 13, 2018, City Council approved a recommendation not to proceed with the proposed Boulevard Trail on the south side of Second Line between Great Northern Road and Old Garden River Road, but to construct a concrete sidewalk instead. Now therefore be it resolved that the resolution be reconsidered.
Okay. Councilor Bruni, do you want to speak to the reconsideration?
Just very briefly, I do believe we have somebody in the audience that would like to speak on this. Am I correct?
Yeah, but he would speak after we've actually decided to reconsider it.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now you're speaking to the merits of reconsidering it.
Yeah.
And if the merits of reconsidering it, you want to give the individual a chance to speak. And if we agree to reconsider it, we would call that person up and we'd certainly give that person the floor.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's something to reconsider. I think speaking to a business owner on that site there, he brought some important facts regarding cost of concrete, cost of asphalt, how it would help businesses in the area. And I think that's why I wanted to reconsider it and bring it forth back to council. I did spend some time, and the individual was Mr. Hilsinger, and I think it's something that maybe council should be discussing further. I guess more dialogue is better, and hopefully we can all come to a good understanding why Mr. Hilsinger would like a bike path on the south side and not just a sidewalk. He is willing to provide some property so the bike path can be built, and the cost-wise can be reduced if it was with asphalt. Probably the asphalt bike path would be cheaper than a concrete sidewalk.
But now you're arguing that.
Yeah.
So
sorry about that.
No problem. Anybody want to speak up? And Councillor Hupperton, did you want to speak to it because you seconded it? Yes. Okay, so Councillor Hupperton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just think it's very important that we give Mr. Hilsinger the chance to have his say. I did also receive his correspondence, and I think it's important. I also agreed with the city staff's recommendation. So, but I do think we need to hear Mr. Hilsinger. So, thank you.
Anybody want to speak in opposition to the reconsideration? Seeing none, all in favor of reconsidering? Okay, so now we're reconsidering. So I'm going to have the clerk read the motion we're reconsidering. Then once the clerk's read the motion we're reconsidering, I'm going to give Mr. Hilsinger an opportunity to address council. And once he's had the opportunity to do that, councilors can ask questions of staff, and we'll take it from there. Okay?
So the July 16 motion that's being reconsidered was a motion by Councillors Christian and Grandinetti, resolved that the report of the design and construction engineer dated July 16, 2018, concerning the Great Northern Road second line traffic studies be received, and that the recommendations be used for planning future traffic improvements.
Okay, so that's the motion that we had approved at our last meeting that we're now reconsidering. Mr. Hilsinger, I welcome you to make your delegation to council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have some handouts here.
Sure, you can hand them to Mr. Councillor Grandinetti and he can distribute them. You guys should just trade, and then you can go back that way, and she can go back that way. Okay, Mr. Hilsinger, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. Let me take you from the most exciting mega project to my little corner of the town. I do appreciate your patience and feel the same excitement as you would have for the PUC and the success of their project. If you ride a bike, walk, run, skate, use a mobility device, and you want to go to the general uptown commercial area or the inn itself, we are challenging the current city plans to construct a 350-meter sidewalk along Second Line, abutting Water Tower End property from Garden River Road to Great Northern Road. For many community-wise reasons, the Water Tower Inn and its supporters, we have some tonight, both here and at home, wish to build an 8-foot wide paved trail. A trail will provide mobility and accessibility for all residents of this area, and especially for the residents of the 247-unit Terra Housing Co-op development, many of whom require mobility devices. It would also serve students in proximate institutions such as the Sault College and St. Mary's College. And if you were in my office, and some of you have been, and you viewed the parking lot and see these people moving back and forth, you would understand that you see some really courageous people, and you fear for their safety as they try to cross the Second Line and use and don't really have the access to it. A trail is more user-friendly because it will be constructed further away from the road, making it more enjoyable and easier for all to reach the west side of the Great Northern Road to access popular restaurants and other shopping opportunities. The trail will suit the needs of travelers because the inn advertises access to all areas of the Sault under the banner Trailhead for Exploring the Great Lakes Heritage Coast. A trail will give us a chance to further enhance our streetscape appearance and reinforce our business culture. The trail will be built at less than half of the capital costs of a sidewalk. And we all know that black surfaces increase snow melt and therefore improve access in winter. So I've handed out both the pictures of the path along which the trail would go from the Garden River Road over to the Great Northern Road. You can see right in front of you that there are various spaces that it goes over. And I handed out an estimate by professional engineers on the basic costs of one form of construction compared to another. Essentially, it's less than a quarter, and it appears to be, and I don't have any expertise in this, it appears to be many more underground utilities and relocations that are unnecessary, including $50,000 approximately for PUC work. I can't say that for sure, but I do know that the basic costs are quite different. And from the beginning, the inn offered 4 feet of free land to the city to facilitate the project. Accordingly, the fence surrounding the Water Tower Inn has already been modified to accommodate. So why would there be any problem now? So I hesitate to say some comments because they may be taken in the wrong mode. I'm fully open to people's ideas. I don't necessarily agree with people's ideas, and they may not agree with my ideas. But there's nothing I say that has anything to do with any personality in this room. It's ideas. Please believe me that. I respect people in this room. From the outset, city engineering and planning have insisted upon conditioning the proposed trail subject to a Great Northern Road Second Line traffic study. I could never understand the relevance of this reasoning. Nonetheless, they appended the trail idea to a report to City Council during your last meeting, which was passed. None of you could have understood the implications of the last sentence on the active transportation segment. Almost the day after the resolution was passed, construction crews were mobilized, causing crisis and considerable diversion for myself and now this council. Engineering planning have also expressed concern about pedestrian safety at Great Northern Road and the Second Line. Please see the solution on the reverse of the document with the pictures, showing how you can use a paint can and a brush to change that intersection. We want to make it very clear that this development, the development of this trail, is a local community and economic development plan with many supporters. Capital exists to build it. The trail is considered an expression of their personal and community values. So to the engineers and planners and the councillors who may be hesitant to support this trail, we ask you to examine your predispositions carefully and to look to the outside world. My life in Sault Ste. Marie is well known, and I really didn't want to get into this, but I feel I have to emphasize certain elements. Since the beginning, I celebrated the connections of this city to the great outdoors and to our strategic geographical location. I built my first Kentucky Fried Chicken store, JJ's Hacienda Drive-In, in '62, and I began to excite this city with the best fried chicken and hamburgers. Yes, it was on the present site, right where we're talking now, where we began developing our relationships with our community. Even though the spoilers like the A&W guy down the road, not the same people that are there now, said, "Sue, I'd eat only burgers and you never sell chicken here." So we built 2 more stores in town, and 2 more down the road, and we led the community parade, the Rotary Community Parade for many, many years, selling chicken to the Rotary Club. In '73, we risked it all to construct the Sioux's first full-service indoor corridor hotel, and added 3 expansions over the years. In the late 70s and 80s, we spawned the first tourism organization, HATS, and the initial Economic Development Corporation, born out of advisory committees of the city and the Chamber of Commerce. For 15 years, from '85 to 2000, I was the main investor, the developer, and a manager of Searchmount Resort. We expanded the enterprise to 4 times its original size, garnering a great deal of community-minded, a great group of community-minded investors, and benefiting from government incentive loans at the time under the banner of the Mountains of the Midwest. We built ski trails, mountain bike trails, nature trails, and attracted up to 85,000 visits in our best years, never again achieved. We inspired and showed leadership for joint trail passes for Searchmount, Hiawatha Highlands, and Stokely Creek. We formed a combined city trails group called Ski Act, which became STAR, which became STAC, and over the years, which collaborated with the city to lead studies and consideration of the now much appreciated, or studies and construction of the now much appreciated Hub Trail. In the early 2000s, the Water Tower Inn saved the iconic water tower from probable demolition by buying it from the city and then paid to have it painted and preserved as a city landmark to the appreciation of many who live here. When we develop our city, the engineers build 3 to 5 wide-laned roads for traffic, including what I call the chicken lane in the middle, and a 3-foot sidewalk tucked to the curb so the city does not have any landscaping media to maintain. Then they plow and pile the snow from these 5 lanes to the edge, which is most often the sidewalk. Our city planners argue for setbacks, and they understand their role to guard the transitions and development codes in this city. But they should be doing more to protect the naturally gifted aspirations with the same development values that our residents admire when they go to places like Charlevoix, Petoskey, Traverse City, and return to the Soo, praising the appearance and the trail values. In my domain and in business influences, we have always aimed for the highest aesthetic values. All through the years since the 60s, we landscaped and maintained the borders of our property to enhance the streetscapes and to show a pretty face for the traveling public. We took ownership of the city median and preened it year after year for 40 years now, almost 50. We never allowed portable signage or other displays to clutter the property, even though positioned across from the big box plaza exit, though we certainly could have profited by doing so. Now we have ideas about how an engineer and a planner can jump out of the box to create a beautiful, functional, community-based trail that would, with some special thinking, landscaping, and shaping, that can perhaps become a best practices example of how streetscapes should be developed in the future. Perhaps we can begin to establish a clear goal for future development of this type that we can all aspire towards. That's in my heart. That's in my blood. That's what I want in my city. There's a huge community impact to this, I believe. We're here to participate. Let's build an inspired trail. Please support this idea, and please allow my supporters and myself to approve a plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your delegation, Mr. Hilsinger. Okay, so we are going to have questions of staff. So we'll start with that. Does anybody, Councillor Hollingsworth, do you have any questions of staff?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I think I'm Don McConnell, our planner. A couple questions. Currently, the Hub Trail that's used by many residents of our community and many visitors of our community. Currently, our Hub Trail, what would you say, what were the percentage of the Hub Trail, what's the percentage of it going through residential areas, the forest areas, versus going past high traffic areas?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I don't have an exact number right off the top of my head, but wherever possible when the Hub Trail was planned out, we avoided high traffic areas. So, you know, we did try and encircle the city. That was part of the original thinking of the Hub Trail, was to have a safe passage around the major urban area and connect various destinations together. But, I mean, we crossed Second Line. We actually crossed Second Line twice. We crossed Great Northern Road once. But as far as running on arterial roads, I can't think of any cases where we do that.
Okay. The other question is, when you talked about the original Hub Trail, when the original Hub Trail was constructed, you mentioned that the goal was to go around the city. Mm-hmm. Who else was involved in deciding the creation of the Hub Trail, where it should be located?
The Hub Trail actually, I think to back up a little bit, the concept of the Hub Trail came from a group of citizens. It was led by a gentleman by the name of Jim Miller. They approached staff and about the concept, and they had more than just cyclists involved. I mean, there were the running club, there was the Voyager Association, various organizations. And from that, we went to council and said, we think this is a really good idea, and we need to develop it a little more in order to get to a state where council could make a decision as to whether or not to build it. So that group, along with a consulting firm, which was Marshall Monahan, Triple M, they're now part of WSP, came up with the proposal for the Hub Trail. We had a couple of open houses. They were extremely well received. And then the first section we did was the section on Shannon Road. And it got really, some of the councillors here will remember that, it got really good public reaction. And we were able to access some government funding and go ahead and construct the rest of the trail. It's almost 25 kilometers long.
Okay. And just two final questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that later tonight you're going to be talking about the Hub Trail going through the machine shop.
We have Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we have a report on council's agenda tonight that recommends 9 other roads be considered for basically going through a road diet system similar to Queen Street East, where we look at on-road bike lanes. No decisions have been made on that yet. We're just looking for council's approval to go ahead and study that. But at the same time, to extend the section that runs along Bay Street now, we do have, and that is an arterial road, I stand corrected, all the way down to the former St. Mary's paper property, and kind of help to integrate that part of the property into the rest of the downtown through an off-road bike path.
Okay, so the integration, we look at the original hub trail, it seems to me that the group, even currently, your current thinking is for safety and also for enjoying the beauty of our community.
Mr. Mayor, safety is always the number one consideration. Always the number one consideration.
Okay. In your opinion, if we do adopt Mr. Hilsinger's thought, would that improve the safety for those that use this path versus closer to a high traffic area?
I think, and we're kind of testing my memory a bit here, Councillor Hollingsworth. When we did the original hub trail, one of the reasons we wanted to do it was to encourage more people to ride. And I think the main reason most people give for not riding a bicycle is simply because they don't feel safe. So we developed a path around the city where with major roads, and the two major roads are Great Northern Road and Second Line, we provide a viable alternative for people who want to ride in those areas. Now, certainly people want to get from one side of Second Line to the other, and people want to get from one side of Great Northern Road to the other. But city staff last year said, let's hire a consultant to look at this, to say what's the best way to do this. And with the Pinot development now, there is another alternative. I have to say, if you go back and look at the cycling master plan, we're not on Second Line where it's really busy. We're not on Great Northern Road where it's busy. That was not recommended by the original consultant. And the consultant we looked at last year, now there was more to it than just cycling, they were looking at vehicular traffic as well, said, let's look at what other alternatives are there. Can we cross 200 meters further north at the Pinot development? Yes. Is that a better crossing? Yes, it is. Hence, that was the recommendation that went to council last month.
Okay.
I leave that to Mr. Elliott if he wants to add to that.
I think, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I think from a safety standpoint, of course, safety is the primary focus. And in the case of Second Line, what I'm essentially hanging my hat on what the professional transportation specialist is telling us. The big problem on Second Line, or Great Northern Road for that matter, is the high volume entrances. If you put a multi-use trail, encouraging cyclists and folks of all mobilities or abilities to use that trail, they're in conflict with high volume entrances. It's a concern on Queen Street where you have residential driveways, which is very low volume entrances. But on Second Line, they're very high volume entrances. So from a cycling standpoint, this professional is saying that for cycling facilities on Second Line, they're best provided by on-street, separate cycling lanes with a barrier. That's how you do it. So when he says that's the best solution, we turn around and say, in order to do that, we need property all the way along both sides. It's a multi-million-dollar reconstruction of Great Northern Road, and if we get, or Second Line, and if we get there when we're reconstructing those roads, then maybe that's the time to do it. So the alternative is to do this ring system, like a ring road, or in this case, a ring trail around it. And that's why this consultant is saying, do your environmental assessments for the northwest quadrant of that intersection, and then do the other environmental assessments for the Walmart side of things, and get facilities to go around it. So from a health and safety standpoint, that's the big concern, is the users of the trail and the high volume entrances, and that's how they tell us to deal with it.
Okay. Thank you. I just have one final question, if you don't mind. Currently, I use the hub trail often, at least twice a week, and I go around the whole entire trail. I also enjoy going up exactly where Mr. Hilsinger is saying. I go up past Sault College, wave at the students, and then go down north, and then I do cut through where the ambulance / the Snowmobilers Association is, and they zip through there behind, close to his inn. And it's really enjoyable because I'm still off the main traffic area. So my question is, and then you also go through the old Garden River Road, through the wonderful school playground, and then finally through to the hospital. So I would like to consider everyone at council to really look at the bigger picture. I understand consultants are the experts, but if there is an opportunity to take this community leader that just spoke to us and his opinions into consideration, it would probably help us to enhance the trail as well. When you look at most of the trail is in a residential, more in a forest area. The last piece I just want to mention is that when I am on the hub trail, I do stop and speak to those that use the trail. And a couple of weeks ago, we had tourists from Sweden, and they could not stop talking highly about the hub trail and how beautiful it is. So I'm not totally convinced that using the high traffic areas the way we want to go. With some more creative thinking, I feel strongly that we can probably do it in a more attractive, comfortable manner. And I'll hold the rest of my comments for later.
I think those are your comments, Councillor Hollingsworth. That wasn't a question. So we have Councillor Fata.
Mayor, I'm not sure, I don't think the question was asked, but the, in the drawing here of the road markings, I just want to be clear on what significance those are. I mean, those are obviously very visible and...
Are you asking Mr. Hilsinger about the drawing he gave us?
Yeah, I just want to be clear as to...
Mr. Hilsinger...
what purpose they will serve. They certainly look like they would make it a much safer intersection to walk your bike or, for that matter, walk. But those markings that you've indicated on the, at the intersection there.
Yes.
I just want to be clear, those don't mean that traffic comes to a stop, like those...
Well, traffic
it means there's a stopping area prior to the current stopping area, which holds people back from pedestrians which allows pedestrians to cross more safely. If you look at the current layout, people are quite often stranded on those little islands. Those little islands don't belong in a plan for that corner. That little islands are where steel coils fall off trucks. It's not a very pleasant situation for anyone. Those little islands are covered with snow in the winter. This is not a suitable way to build this intersection. So by pulling the places that you stop for your left turns, for your main traffic through, and for your right turns back, and timing using modern day traffic coordination signals, which can be changed by satellite, by the hour, by the minute, for allowing traffic to come this way and that way and keeping your flow going, which I know you're going to not do it by the minute, but I mean, it can be timed to the periods of the day. The people, or the pedestrians, do have time. You also use the little walking signals which count down time you have. Pedestrians can be dispersed through those walkways in a much in an efficient way that the intersection still works for the main purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Hilsinger.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just saying that they do look, visibly, they look like they would make it safer to cross that very heavy traffic at the intersection. I'm just wondering, Mr. Elliott, like, since we have that multi-use pathway from Old Garden River Road down Second Line, like, wouldn't this be maybe considered an extension of that path that we already have on Second Line? Like, wouldn't it make sense to have this, the people that are traveling east on Second Line, this gives them the opportunity to safely travel on this bike path and then latch on to the one that's just south or just east of Old Garden River Road.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, the study recommends that those extensions, the connections to the hub trail, be done at the Northern Avenue end on, pardon me, the south side, and up through the Walmart complex in that area. Again, we need to decide on an alignment, but the study, the specialist is recommending those two diverge around it to stay away from this intersection. And if I can add one more thing, Mr. Mayor, to the previous comment, we agree with Mr. Hilsinger that there may be something we can do from a pedestrian standpoint for Second Line and Great Northern Road. We can take a look at that intersection and see if we can change the paint. It would involve a change. We'd have to check with MTO because they have supervision, or they have to endorse our paint marks on connecting links. but there may be some better things we can do, some wider pedestrian facilities, and moving the stop bars, et cetera, to make it more pedestrian friendly. We have no quarrel with that whatsoever.
Yeah, so I think that's an important issue, but it seems to me to be a separate issue. Like, we're talking about a trail that is going to, right now you're planning a 6-foot sidewalk, as I understand it. And instead of putting a 6-foot sidewalk there, Mr. Hilsinger is saying, put an 8-foot trail. Yeah, so I accept and agree with this larger issue he's raised about the general safety of that corridor, and I think it's something we should look at. But for the purposes of tonight's debate, we're not debating the safety of and the markings on that intersection. We're talking about whether or not we put in a 6-foot sidewalk or an 8-foot trail. I do want to make the comment that there's nothing there now, and staff is recommending we have a passage there for pedestrians and people to access and walk, and it's quite a large sidewalk, and it's larger than we generally do. So it is an upgrade and an improvement, and I think that the point that's being made here is if you're going to do this 6-foot sidewalk, in Mr. Hilsinger's and his supporters' position, an 8-foot asphalt trail is better. So just do the 8-foot asphalt trail, and that would be more positive.
I'm listening to my friend Sunny Spina here, who just had a report from a lady that has a wheelchair, and she was at the Rotary Day parade, I guess, Rotary Day parade, holding up a sign in her wheelchair saying, "Please repair the sidewalks." When people ride their mobile devices, mobility assist devices, there's a jarring factor. The wheels are usually small. So people are continually getting pounded. There's so many sidewalks in this city that, this is jumping ahead. I better shut up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
You might be losing your point here, though.
But so I'm thinking we can even put a 10-foot trail. What it does is it pulls everybody.
Okay. So we're going to just.
It pulls everybody back on the traffic more.
We've got to continue with the questions from council. Yeah. So I have on my list here, Councillor Fada, are you done?
No, I just wanted to take a moment and just thank Mr. Hilsinger for bringing this forward. I'm just kind of wondering why you wait till the 11th hour.
Well,
no, listen, I'll take that. He hasn't waited to the 11th hour. He's been dealing with staff on this for a while, and staff's recommendation, we've been here. This has been here a couple times. We've asked for the expert reports. The expert reports came back, and at the July meeting, as a council, we went with the recommended solution. So that happened at the July meeting. He saw that happened, and this is the first chance he can get back to say, I don't like that. So I don't think it would be fair to indicate that he's done this at the last hour or that staff have put this off. I know there's been a lot of communication between him and staff on this. He just has a very different opinion than the people that we've sought advice from on how to construct this.
Just one final point. I just wanted to thank him in advance for the donation that he's proposing for the extra width of the hub trail. I wish that the people at Third Line were as generous as you are.
Well, this is one thing I wish we could build.
But, Mr. Hilsinger, we won't get through this if we just keep on talking like this. So there's other councillors that have questions of staff on the matter. So I have Councillor Bruni, then Councillor Nero, then Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to Mr. Elliott, the quote that Mr. Hilsinger provided us, any comments on this?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we agree completely with the estimate for the sidewalk itself, the $110,000, because that's our contract price for that is actually $108,000. The cost of the trail is another matter. If you want to build a trail with an asphalt surface properly, you need to dig down, you need to drain the subbase. There's some ditching that needs to be relocated. And the other question is, do you want the concrete banding on each side of it, which adds considerable cost? Our estimate is in the $80,000 range for an asphalt path, and it's $135,000, I think, if you want the concrete banding. And the reason I bring the concrete banding up is it makes for a better trail. That's what you have on Queen Street. There's a concrete border, a flat concrete border on each edge. You may not need that in front of the Water Tower Inn, but what do you do to designate a trail like this at the Shell gas station. It's an asphalt trail through an asphalt parking lot. So how is it delineated? In those situations, the concrete path it delineates things a lot better than the asphalt, when most of that property is asphalt. The other issue is, what do we do with the trail at the Shell, at the gas station? It has to come back out to the road. Are they going to be willing sellers of property? We don't know. So there's several issues that come in from a design standpoint if we want to go with the trail.
If the trail was going to go to the corner, we would need Shell's cooperation, and if they weren't going to gift us the property, as Mr. Hilsinger is, we'd have to buy the property, and that would have to be factored into the cost.
So we don't know what the cost would be, an official cost here.
No.
I mean, we have this in front of us, but we don't know what the total cost would be, correct?
Mr. Mayor to Council Bruni, that's correct. We don't know, but we have reasonable estimates of what construction would cost. The way, again, you want to build an asphalt path with some longevity in it, because asphalt is a flexible pavement, concrete is a rigid pavement, and it lasts much longer. It may be cheaper to build now, but it'll be more expensive to maintain later, because you're going to have to do it much sooner, redo it much sooner.
So would we, just a question, can we defer it until we find what the cost is?
Well, there's, Councillor Nero had an amending motion asking staff to return with some information so that you can make a decision between whether you wanted to continue with the 6-foot sidewalk or go on with the trail. It's 6 foot. It's a 6-foot sidewalk. So, but we haven't tabled that yet, because you're asking these questions.
Okay, maybe I'll let our Councillor Nero speak then. He's going to bring that forward. I'll second it if there's no seconder.
The motion is there. I'm not bringing it forward right now.
No, the clerk has it. So Councillor Christian second this. Earlier, Councillor Bruni and Councillor Christian passed up an amending motion. I didn't want to. I wanted to give council the chance to ask questions and have this debate. But what the amending motion says is that, so right now the motion before you is the staff recommendation. It's the one you approved in July. The amending motion approves the staff recommendation with the exception of the sidewalk, and postpones the sidewalk until our first meeting in September. And at the same time, asks staff to return a report about the ability to and the cost of the dynamics of establishing this proposed trail. So then at your September meeting, you could always go back to the 6-foot sidewalk, or you could go ahead with the trail based on what staff would be telling you. The information is that from staff's perspective about the cost of building the trail and the ability to build the trail, we have to determine what would happen at the Shell gas station. If the Shell gas station wasn't interested in selling us the land, we would need to build the trail.
Okay, fair enough.
So, did you want that to be read, Councillor Nero?
Mr. Mayor, I had a question, and I don't know how many more councillors you have on your list.
I have you, Myers, and Hoopernin.
If I can, I'd like to ask my question, and then if you want to table it,
I'll take the rest of the questions, and then we'll table your amendment.
So my question is for Mr. Elliott, and it refers back to the answers, Mr. Elliott, that you gave to Councillor Fata and to Councillor Hollingsworth regarding the bicycle trails and what the consultant's report came back as. And let me say that I agree with the consultant's report that second line between Great Northern Road and Sackville is busy enough, and I understand the reasons why it shouldn't be a bicycle trail. And your answer was speaking to that bicycle trail, but the request in front of us is not to expand this asphalt trail to Sackville. It's from Old Garden River Road to Great Northern Road, and that's the extent of it. So my question is, how do you see that fitting into the hub trail if you call this a starting point? And I also, let me say that I agree with what we have pre-planned for our secondary routes for the hub trail that lead into the primary hub trail. So if you were to look at this as a starting point to get onto the hub trail and think in reverse and saying we're starting this hub trail at Great Northern Road and linking up to where it hits at Old Garden River Road on the existing hub trail. How do you see that happening, working? It's not a link, it's a starting point or a spoke. I don't know.
Yeah,
what the word
Mr.
is.
Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I view, if this was an asphalt trail, it would be a spoke off the hub. That's what we would consider it, much like the asphalt path that goes down Second Line, and its destination is Strathclair Park. That asphalt path going down to Strathclair, it's a multi-use path on the north side of Second Line from Pine Street down. That's kind of a spoke off the hub trail that takes you to that destination. And I view some of these spokes as connections between the hub trail and a destination. I'm not sure what the destination here is.
Well, again, consider it a starting point. Think of it in terms of a starting point. So your destination is to link to the hub trail going east on Second Line.
So you're starting at the corner
You're
of
starting at
Great
the
Northern
hotel.
Road and
Let's
Second
say-
Line?
Let's say we're starting at the hotel. There are customers at the hotel that want to go to the hub trail where they could walk outside and they're on the hub trail and they walk east and they hit the main hub trail.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I guess I have no quarrel with that, even if it was a second trail beside the sidewalk on the water tower property.
Yeah, they would be able to do what you're proposing on the 6-foot sidewalk that the city's going to build.
Our concern, Councillor Nero, would be the people that are going the other way. When they get to the corner where the hub trail is at Old Garden River Road and Second Line, they say, oh, here's an asphalt path that goes west. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
And if it goes to the corner of Second Line and Great Northern Road, our consultant's telling that's not a good connection.
Okay, I get that. Mr. Mayor, that's the only question I had, and I'll save my comments for the resolution.
Okay, Councillor Myers.
My question's been asked and answered.
Great. Councillor Hupinen.
Mr. Mayor, actually, Councillor Nero brought up my point as well. I have copies of the, let's see here, the hub trail, and I also have copies of the cycling master plan, and they're both continual. They're both continuous, and to put an asphalt trail from Great Northern to Second Line, I don't see the point. Now, Councillor Nero expressed that it would be a starting point. I didn't think of that. I thought of it as an end point, as Mr. McConnell had said. So I thought of people getting on it and then ending up at Second Line and not knowing where to go. And let's not forget that this is actually the Trans-Canada Highway. And to me, I can't seem to wrap my head around the Trans-Canada Highway and our hub trail as being connected. So that was all clear. Thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Gradinetti?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just all this talk about sidewalks and property through Shell. I'm just thinking that if we do an asphalt path from Great Northern Road going east, the sidewalk will be concrete, but could, through you to Mr. McConnell, could we not mark the edge of the asphalt path with paint? So this way people know that that's a path, a bike path, or compared to if it's concrete? As Mr. Hilsinger alluded to, paint doesn't cost much.
I think the answer is you could.
Yeah, and then another question is, through you, Mr. Mayor, to either Mr. Elliott or Mr. Hilsinger, could we not do a concrete sidewalk from Great Northern Road to just east of the car wash, which would probably be the closer to one of the entrances to the water tower inn, and then carry on with an asphalt path from there to Old Goulet Bay Road and Old Garden River Road, sorry. And then they could, people that go to the hotel use for bike tourism or the hub trail, carry on from there, have a sign from Water Tower Inn or to Water Tower Inn. We're kind of meeting in the middle with this. Would that be possible? And Mr. Hilsinger, would you be happy if we were to do something like that?
Any one of you can go right now and look at the south side of the second line, and see a worn path through what's left of the median from the work, the disruption that was there last year for the road construction. Okay? In planning, in knowledge of buildings and how we move people, it doesn't matter what you think about people and where they want to go. They're going to go there. So they're doing that now. They're doing that now on bicycles. They're doing it on the road in scooters, and they're doing it as pedestrians. You can stand in my office and see this day in, day out. That's it. Bicyclers are going to go where the closest way is to the place they want to go. They're not going to go this way and that way. But let's go back to this short piece, 350-meter piece of land. I want to make my hotel a better place with a great entrance and the streetscape and appearance that we want to create with it, with landscaping, with flowers, with all elements of building trails that may have a little shape to them, may not just go flat like a sidewalk. I want to do this because it's going to enhance that part of the city. I want to do it because I think we're going to learn something if we dare risk it. Now, how hard is it to do it at way less price? You don't need to put concrete sidewalks on the side of the frickin' pavement. The Shell station has the same easement we have. Why do we have to ask for land? It must exist there now, does it not? Or does the Shell station go right to the road? I don't think so. So the property is there. I'm doing something that this city has to learn how to do, and that's give land to the city to enhance the thoroughfare. I'm trying to show an example that this is what this planning and engineering and a person that should be hired by this city should be going out and doing, going and finding and leveraging property because development occurs. Not after the fact, before the fact. We could have trails coming out of yin-yang around this city now if we would have gone to the big box area long before now and said, we need room for, if you want to build all this, we're going to have a path through there for people to go. Okay? We could do that there. We could do it at the new mega whatever complex called a truck stop that you just built with hardly any landscaping whatsoever, backed up against the residents of the city and blowing smoke and fuel and all the noise they got there. These are things we do not have to do anymore. They're far beyond. If we're going to talk about mega storage projects, why the hell can't we talk about mega livability in this city? Thank you.
Okay, so that was the answer to your question, Mr. Grandinetti, Councilor Grandinetti. Staff, do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Do you have anything else, Councilor Grandinetti?
No, that's good. Thank you.
So we're going to read Councilor Nero's amendment now to the motion.
Resolved that the report of the design and construction engineer dated July 16, 2018, concerning the Great Northern Road second line traffic studies be received, and that the recommendations be used for planning future traffic improvements, with the exception of construction of a concrete sidewalk on the south side of second line between Old Garden River Road and Great Northern Road, that the proposed construction of the said sidewalk be postponed and referred back to appropriate staff. Further, that staff report back on September 10, 2018, concerning the impact of construction of a 6-foot to 8-foot paved walkway instead of a concrete sidewalk.
Okay, so that's what's before us now. It's a motion to amend. So that's what we're talking about now. So do we have any debate on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? So the amendment's carried. So that's the main motion now. Is there any more debate on this? All of you have had a chance to speak to it. This would see us get a report from staff and make the decision at our next meeting. Yes, go ahead.
Just a clarification. So obviously staff have heard the discussion this evening. We haven't captured everything that was brought up in the resolution, but I think staff, would be fair to say, got the thread of what we're looking for to come back to us.
Oh, I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Nero.
I'm going to speak, I was afraid to speak to it after Mr. Hilsinger did that, but I'm going to speak to it anyways. Just let me start by saying I certainly understand where Mr. Hilsinger is coming from. We all can see that he's passionate about his suggestions as he is about living in Sault Ste. Marie. So we tonight realized that, and we accommodated his request to reconsider the motion so that he could make his case to council. And he's done that. But now, you know, I believe that the next thing we have to do is we just can't jump to do the asphalt. You know, if council decides, there's a step missing here. We have to do our due diligence, ask staff to report back at our next meeting, and there are. We've been talking about a number of issues, and I want to list those so that it's on the record. We have to get this cost. We talked about the estimate that we were given. We heard from Mr. Elliott that, well, that's not a complete estimate, although some of it is correct. So we need to get that real cost. And this information we need to get from our staff. I appreciate the fact that Mr. Hilsinger spent his money to go to an engineering firm to get an estimate. I appreciate that. But if we had everybody coming to this council with estimates to do city work, I think we would be in pretty bad shape. We have staff that we have hired to do that, and we have to appreciate that they do that work for us. So number one, they have to confirm those costs. How do we get from the water tower to Great Northern Road? We heard some problems. We've got the Shell property. We all realize what's going on. Mr. Hilsinger has his suggestion that there may be the same right-of-way there. There may not be. There may be enough property to do it. There may not. We may have to acquire it. Let's get staff to get that in the report to get back to us. Is the option of going asphalt 8-foot trail for the frontage on the water tower end property and then going to a sidewalk for the frontage on the Shell property? Does that make any sense? Is it doable? Let's get staff's input on that. Let's confirm if there's any liabilities. If we go away from what we've already discussed, there are consultants involved in what we approved at our last meeting in July. We may deviate. Let me say we may deviate if council decides to do that. Are there any liabilities that go with that? Anything attached? And finally, I think overall, there's a letter that's attached to our agenda this evening from Mr. Hilsinger, and there are a lot of statements in it. I can't say that I disagree with any of them, but I think we need to do our due diligence and have staff look at that letter and report back on those statements correct or aren't they correct? Do they make sense? What's doable, what's not? So that's the step that's missing, and that's what the resolution is asking for.
Councilor Christian, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Nero and I have had extensive discussions, and I agree with everything that he said, so I'll keep my comments brief. At the time of the original resolution, we were looking to try to solve a problem with pedestrian traffic on the south side of Second Line. And I've always tried and strived to accept staff recommendations because they're the experts, and I'm not. But I do recognize Mr. Hilsinger and what he means to Sault Ste. Marie and what he's done for Sault Ste. Marie, and we have to keep in mind that when he promotes his business, his hotel, he's also promoting Sault Ste. Marie, and that's something that we strive for, and quite frankly, I'd like to see more businesses doing the same thing. I want to strive to be business friendly. I mean, we've got a survey underway that I penned the resolution for several months ago. It's important that we do what we can to help local business. That being said, we have to respect the logistics and the rules, etc. So we need to properly weigh everything. I'm a firm believer in communication. The more we can discuss this, consider all sides of this, I think the more we will make an informed decision. So I appreciate what staff has done, and it makes perfect sense. I also appreciate that Mr. Hilsinger has real concerns, and he's clearly outlined those with passion. I'm considering, I'm willing to accept the reconsideration and get the information from staff under some basic principles. And first and foremost is that it will help in the long run pedestrian traffic, that it'll help people with mobility issues, that it is an opportunity for Mr. Hilsinger to enhance his property, and if we can work jointly with a local business person, a prominent business person, to jointly help all of us, that's a good thing. But what I won't accept is that this now becomes part of the hub trail, that it might be a starting point, and I understand from a marketing perspective that that would make sense, because there's a danger in going down this road where all of a sudden now we're taking the cycling and the hub trail master plan and just changing it on a whim. So there's opportunity to look at the considerations being made here, and I'm willing to do that. But in order for me to do my job as a councillor, I need all the information, and I'm confident that staff will be able to come back with that for the next meeting.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth? This is on the amendment.
Yeah. Just comments. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Hilsinger for coming to us with his insights. The bottom line is that's what we're about. We're a community. We're not at the provincial level. We're not at the federal level. We're a community. So I'm glad as council we are here to listen to the input of someone that has lived here for many years and has contributed to our community. Also, I want to say thank you to another person that's in the audience, Andre, who also represents cyclists but also active transportation, and those that are staying behind Mr. Hilsinger. If I could just reiterate to council, beautification is important to our city, safety is important to our city, tourism is important to our city, and that area of Great Northern Road right now is not very attractive. We know that. So hopefully, and I know that staff will reach out to Mr. Hilsinger further as they plan and they relook at this. Take into consideration a citizen's comments, because we are a city, we live here, this is our home. If someone comes to us with their thoughts, with lots of good information, with facts, we should be open to potentially changing our minds. So again, Mr. Hilsinger, thank you for coming to us. And this is our city, this is our home. It's not a provincial or federal level. This is who we are. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Turco, I think you call a vote on the motion, Councillor Turco?
Yes.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion? Yeah. Motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Madam Clerk, we can move on. We are on the consent agenda. We have a group here from the Métis Nation of Ontario, so maybe we can, if any councillors have any questions on their matter, we can deal with that first so they don't have to sit through the entire consent agenda. Councillors, anybody have, I'm just looking for the, Madam Clerk, if we could have the number of that on the consent.
That is agenda item 6.6, the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council EDF application.
Any questions on this? You got comments on it? Councillor Myers? I don't think we have any questions, gentlemen. I think you're likely going to get a lot of support here, so it's just some comments.
Okay, we did prepare a brief presentation. It's if it's not necessary, I'll on the interest of time.
You can give it if you like, but I think you're winning, so you might want to reconsider.
Okay, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead then.
You're welcome to do it. Councillor Myers? I support it. So,
very good.
But we're not going to, we don't separate it from consent, so you won't see the vote until it goes with the consent agenda. Okay. But I saw you sitting there, so we just wanted to give you a chance to, if anybody had questions. Councillor Myers had some comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make the comment that there's actually 4 items on our agenda this evening under consent that relate to heritage and culture in some fashion or other. And I was going to actually be making the comments when I was bringing up item 6.4, the bush plane, but I'm going to jump to it, of course, now because this is where we are. Bottom line being that this investment of $30,000 from our Economic Diversification Fund is leveraging other funds. And it's a really very small investment compared to what it's going to leverage. And I think it's very exciting that we would have an opportunity to finally see a cultural centre that's being proposed for the Métis Nation of Ontario. So I just wanted to commend you on it, and again, appreciate the fact that we have this EDF as a place to go to, because that's what it's for council to be able to support good projects like this and not put it on the city levy, but it's done through a fund that's already there for this purpose. So thank you. Good work.
I think it's a great application. I'm really happy to support it, and I wish your center much success and look forward to partnering with you in the future.
We look forward to the ribbon cutting.
So it'll just, if we didn't pull it from consent, it goes with consent, so it'll get passed with the consent. So you're in good shape.
Okay. Thank you very much, and just wanted to point out the help we got from Tom Vera and his staff, and Dan Hollingsworth and his staff as well. Thank you, both of you and both of your teams, for assisting us to bring it to this point.
Great to hear. Great to hear. Thank you.
Do we have the presentation? We have it?
Yeah, we have the presentation.
We have the PowerPoint, okay.
Okay, so council, we're on the consent agenda. Any other items on consent? Councillor Fadda, we'll start with you then.
I want to pull 6.2, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we'll pull 6.2.
And that also includes 11.1.5, 2018/168 bylaw.
Okay, so we'll pull 6.2. Any other matters in consent? Councillor Myers.
First one is 6.4, the Bush Plain Heritage. And again, this is one that, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask Mr. Ver to just comment, because I believe that our $100,000 investment is part of a package of funding that wasn't fully identified in the information that would go to the public and to even all of council. I think it's a funding of in excess of $1 million, and our $100,000 is actually one of the smallest pieces. But could I ask Mr. Ver, Mr. Mayor, he's aware of this, that I was going to ask, to identify the other funding sources and the other amounts that are part of this total envelope?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Vera.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. The Bush Plain has been able to receive, and it's been approved, $497,000 from NOHFC, $438,000 from FedNor, and then through their own fundraising, they're contributing $124,000. So the outside funding for this project is over $1 million, $1,059,000 that will be going towards the refurbishment and enhancement of the Bush Plain Centre.
Thank you, and I appreciate you providing me that. And our $100,000, I couldn't leverage. I mean, what more could you do? My gosh, that's a great leveraging. And I think it's important that we understand, so that the public can get it, that this project, when it's complete, it's an upgrade to exhibits and the events and the purchase of new equipment, as well as the renovations, but that it will increase visitation to our Heritage Bush Plain Centre from outside our region. So there's a real support here for the centre's sustainability and growth, and council has been supporting them along the way as an outside agency. So I'm really delighted to see this, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Myers. Any other matters? Councillor Hollingsworth, within the same matter? Okay. Any other matters, Councillor
I have a few of them.
Okay,
Sorry.
So
6.6 is further on our agenda. And again, as I was alluding to, it's another example of an excellent use of the EDF program with the Métis Nation. We talked about that a moment ago. And also noting 6.8 and 6.9. 6.8 is the historic, or at least the historic plaque for the ACR Engine House. 6.9, renewing the agreement 49th Field Regiment in the Museum. So as I was saying, it brings a total of 4 matters on our agenda tonight that relate to supporting and demonstrating the value of our heritage and historic markers in the community. And I think this aligns so well with the future Sault Ste. Marie Arts and Culture Action Team mandate, Mr. Mayor. That's part of your vision, and that we're building on our pillars. And I'm really pleased to see council support, because this is a real growth area in our community. So I just wanted to draw attention to those 4, Mr. Mayor.
I agree with you entirely, Councillor Myers.
I'm glad. I have more. 6.7, John Rhodes Community Center Restaurant.
Okay, 6.7.
And it's really not a question, Mr. Lamming, on this. It's really just a comment. I was happy to see that Jody Wilson was able to come back to the table with this, with the proposal that is being recommended here. He is a Ward 2 resident. The restaurant was in Ward 2, and Councillor Sheehan and I went through a few matters with him when he was struggling and trying to operate Chili Willy's. So I obviously staff are recommending this, and there's a level of assurance from staff that they feel comfortable obviously going forward with this recommendation. I don't know if Mr. Lamming does want any comment on it, but I've made my comments before that I really want to see this be a neighborhood restaurant with some visible, let's pull people in from around the area to come and use this restaurant. So, Mr. Lamming's report.
I could just get my mic.
Yeah, you're on.
He needs
you're on, Mr. Lamming.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, yes, there was lots of excitement and a lot of interest in the space. We had numerous proponents that came forward, and we're happy to receive 2 bids, and Mr. Wilson was successful. We had the evaluation committee, which comprised 4 of us, go through the matrix, and we're happy to present this, want to move forward.
So what is the date that we expect it would actually be open for business?
Well, it's a
for
pretty
the public's awareness.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Meyer, it's a pretty aggressive time frame. We're hoping with council support this evening for Mr. Wilson to get in later this week, with the agreement to have a date of September the 1st, or for the first payment to come due. So the goal would be early September.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we support this proponent as much as possible. We do a big splash, we have a grand opening of some sort, or a reopening, or whatever you want to call it, but that we really make it known to the public that there's a restaurant there that people can go to. So thank you. That's on that one, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, for one, I'm glad we got back to this place, and by this place I mean a local business operator occupying the space and occupying the space and operating from the space. I think it'll be positive, and I wish them well with it. And certainly, if they want to do a ribbon cutting, we'll certainly attend and do that. Councillor Butland.
Yes, very briefly, repeating the previous 2 speakers. It's good to see a happy ending, because I know the divorce between Mr. Wilson and us and the facility at that time, it was rough going. They said, no, you're replacing in town with an out of town development, and it didn't go down well. So it's very pleasing to see Mr. Wilson's back, and I think with fresh ideas, and let's go forward. Let's support this development. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
And a rejuvenated space.
Yeah.
Anybody else in 6.7? Councillor Fada.
Can someone tell me if there's any monies being spent by the city to prepare it for Mr. Wilson?
It's in the report.
Yeah,
so it's all in the report.
Just want to hear it being said. I just want to hear it being said. The public knows. Is there any funding being spent?
There is money being spent on the space, yes, it's in your report.
Yeah, okay.
So would somebody, for the record, for satisfy Councillor Fada, say what we're doing? Mr. Lammy?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fada. We're working together with the proponent in the space, so if there's anything from a capital outlay, if that's what you're getting at, we would bring that back to council right now. Yes.
We committed when we put the tender out to whomever was going to receive the tender that we were going to do work on the space and bring the space to date to some degree. So they have to work through those plans together now. Okay, go ahead.
6.13, downtown development update. I think that this report is it's fulsome and very informative. I'm very pleased to see, I had raised it along the way about, I was uncomfortable that we would put out funds to actually hire event staff as a permanent staff position for an outside entity, because there's many outside entities who'd love us to do that. So I really like the approach that's being undertaken here, that's in the report about working together with the Downtown Association to look for a FedNor intern. And I think we'll be some of the funds will help a little bit with that, but it's great. There's a lot of really good information. I hope that we've all had a chance to go through this, and I hope that somehow or other we can get this to the public, that the public can learn, if they can get on our agenda on our website and learn all the things that are underway for the downtown development. It's a very fulsome report, extremely informative, and really exciting, all the things that are going on in here. So I commend our staff who have been working very closely on this. And Mr. McConnell, I know that the planning department, along with, with obviously community enterprise staff, it's really exciting what's going on. So,
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. McConnell. Just a quick question. I always seem to push this, but I'm going to push it again. Excellent report, but I can't remember. Is there any plans for accessibility downtown, accessibility parking? Again, most other communities that we visit always seem to have an outline for a blue area for those that are seniors or need accessibility parking.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Hollingsworth, we actually work quite closely with both our own Transit and Parking Division and, as you know, with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. With regards to accessible parking, all of our public parking lots do contain accessible parking criteria. they have spaces. They have barrier-free spaces in all of our parking lots. As a matter of fact, when it was brought to our attention about 2 months ago that the city's parking lot, the international parking lot, right beside the former Woco building, which contains the Ontario Disability Support Program, that's a private parking lot. It's private in the sense that it's a completely monthly rental parking lot, and that a number of people who have accessibility challenges have to go to those offices. We went in and repainted lines and put up signs and created a couple of barrier-free parking spaces. So I do think we're quite responsive to those people. I know my colleague, Mr. Elliott here, has plans. They've changed the standards for putting saw cuts in our sidewalks, and that's being reflected in Bruce Street, which eliminates some of the bumps that was talked about earlier. So yes, we are working quite closely with our accessibility committee on both overall policy and going in and making specific changes where they're recommended.
Great. I'd just like to give the opportunity for those at home to know that we are thinking about it and always our priority. And I know that once we decide what Queen Street's going to look like, we'll have accessibility along Queen Street, I'm sure. So thank you for just re-educating. Also, I just wanted to comment that the downtown is looking much, much better. And I know that you and your team have been working closely with Josh Ingram, the Downtown Association. So I give credit to your team and also Mr. Josh Ingram, but I also want to give credit to the merchants. In such a short while after that consultant was in town, they have taken the liberty to go out and improve their own areas with patio furniture and so forth. So it's, again, a positive example where everyone's working together.
Okay. Anybody else on that report? No. Councillor Myers, finish up.
Last one on consent for me is 6.14, Shape the Sioux update. And I want to just widen this so I can read it. First thing is I want to commend our planning staff for this extensive consultation and input from the public. I believe all demographics and economic strata were considered. Over the last 6.5 months, planning staff have gone to our residents to engage folks where they are at events and in their daily lives. And I've never seen such a broad-based feedback opportunity in my 12 years on council and in my 14 years at EDC, and I really truly commend our staff for taking the time and not rushing this process. So please pass that on, Don, to your team on that. Excellent work. One question, and it's around the second unit housing regulations. The second units are described as self-contained residential units for the private kitchen, bathroom facilities, and sleeping areas within dwellings such as a basement apartment or within accessory structures such as above a garage. Second units cannot be standalone structures. That's, I believe, a change in provincial legislation that's going to permit that in our municipality. Is that correct? Do you want to enhance that at all?
We need to respond to that, to that direction from the province.
Yeah, we're required to do that because I know that over the years that I think every councillor here has probably had questions from neighbours about second units that they're aware of that are in their neighbouring residents, and they probably aren't going to be real happy about this. So it's just good that people realize this is provincial legislation that we're compelled to offer. One question, would travel trailers in driveways be eligible as second units? Even, I guess they're standalone, but.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, no.
Thank you very much. That's been an issue as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's it for me on consent.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just have one. 6.5, more just a comment. Industrial technology benefits, capacity building program, so forth. I just want to basically say, again, kudos to the EDC. This is basically for defense industry. There is so much potential with this. It's another positive example where the EDC has been reaching out to existing companies in the area and elsewhere to try to help them diversify. But also, this is an example where they're trying to diversify our economy. When I lived down in Maryland, I had a chance to live in Maryland, and their industry around defense is absolutely huge, and the offshoots of jobs is substantial. So I just want to say I'm glad that we're able to support this because in the future, we're going to gain a lot of payback. Just talking quickly about Maryland, I mean, with the defense, back in 2016, their economy benefited $1.89 billion in defense industry. So who knows where this is going to go? But again, thank you to the EDC and the team for bringing this to us and to the Economic Development Board for making this happen. Thank you.
Anybody else on that topic? Okay, anybody else with the consent agenda items? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you could read the motion.
I have a motion resolved that all of the items under date August 13, 2018, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda item, I believe it's 6.20.
6.2.
Be approved as recommended.
Oh, 6.20?
He said 6.2. I think he meant 6.20.
Okay, 6.20. All in favor? Carried. If we can deal with 6.20 then now, Councillor Fata?
Just a question of order. I have a motion to ask that the property be re-advertised. Now, would that be dealt with first, or my comments regarding this particular item as it currently stands? Which would be first?
I think you have a seconder for your motion? Because I think you have to put your motion forward.
Well, I don't have a seconder as of this moment, no, but if someone, if I can make my argument, perhaps maybe there might be, it might shed more light.
You can't do it that way. You have to
well, let's put it this way. I'm going to comment on the...
Sure, so you'll have no motion. You can comment on the agenda item as it is.
If I get a reaction from someone, then...
Make your comments, Councillor Fata. You're speaking against the motion.
Okay, I'll just comment on the 6.20. The property has always been exempt. So the property, as it's been operated all these years, has been exempt property. So the city has received no property tax revenue from this property. If this proposal goes through, it will continue to be an exempt property, and the city will reap no tax revenue from it. During the course of the putting this property on the market and then getting the different 2 or 3 bidders, 4 bidders that came forward, the second offer, keeping in mind that the original offer has been reduced by 50,000, so we...
Councillor Fata, you can't talk about like things that we canvassed in caucus.
Okay.
Okay. You've been on council for how many years?
Cato, you got...
No, 15. You can't talk about things that we talk about in caucus.
Okay. I'm going to say
deal
this.
With legal matters.
Then this is what I'll say, Mr. Mayor. We had the opportunity to sell it to a property that will leave it as being exempt. We had the opportunity to sell it to a private developer.
Yeah, he's still doing it.
Can we not comment about that? Can I not say that one of the offers was from a private developer, which would make it taxable? Can I say that?
No, you're talking about, so City Council received a number of offers. We canvassed these things in caucus. They were legal matters, and we applied the same principles we always do, and took, the offer before the public is the offer for the most value.
Then I'll speak
and you want to rehash
general terms. I'll speak in general terms.
Is it?
I'll speak in general terms, Mr. Mayor.
No, you can speak to anything in the report.
Okay. We had an offer, and that's the offer that the city will sell the property for, and we're done. It's exempt. It will be exempt, and we'll never get another nickel from that property. If we had sold it to a private developer, as was my option, we would do what candidates and current councillors claim they do. They want to increase the tax base. That's a promise that many people make. I've made it. Everybody here has probably made it. Here's an opportunity to increase the tax base. So for a slight difference in the price of the first offer and the second offer, we would have had a property that would have been taxable, and by now, the property would have reaped more than what we're getting from this property in its current state. And going forward, we would be getting in terms of tax dollars, somewhere in the order of $200,000 over the next 10 years, which we're not going to get in its current state. So my point is, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to make...
You're speaking against the motion. You're going to vote against it.
Yeah, I'm simply trying to make it clear to each of these members on council that we talk about increasing the tax base. We had the opportunity to do it here, and we chose not to. I'm trying to remind the councillors that the original offer wasn't accepted. I would suggest that this property should be re-advertised, and that's part of my motion, is to see if we can do it properly in a fair manner and re-advertise it.
Councillor Myers?
Jeez. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask our solicitor to comment on this because we've gone through a legal process. The process is consistent. I've been here for 12 years, as has Councillor Fata. We have not done anything that is the least bit unfair. I don't want to leave that impression in the public. Quite frankly, you're not somebody with a crystal ball, Councillor Fata. Neither am I. I don't know what the proponents that have purchased this property may do in the future. For all I know, they're going to build a house on it with big assessment. So I'm going to ask our solicitor to reaffirm the process we followed, Mr. Mayor. I don't want the public left with some impression there's been something untoward done here.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. In terms of process, the City Legal Department has followed the property surplus bylaw and the disposition of that property. And this has gone through a number of years, actually, in regards to this particular piece of land. It was advertised. There were some bids received. And Council, by bylaw, approved the sale to Mr. Graber. And that was done on April 10th, 2017. So a proper process was followed in terms of declaring the property surplus, advertising the property. The bid that was approved by council then and authorized by bylaw was the highest bid received. However, as the report indicates, the closing of the transaction was delayed because of a variety of factors, and it included environmental issues and the fact that city identified the need for a ravine to be established there, which then in turn decreased the amount of land available for sale. So that is the reduction of price from the original offer of $200,000 to $150,000. So the complete process has been followed here. This individual who has put forward the bid also has retained counsel, has put some significant amount of money into it, and certainly we can have some exposure there too in terms of the fact that we've gone along our process now. We've declared the sale there, and now we're negotiating the price. And given the fact that we do have a lesser amount of land that we're offering, this has been recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So suffice it to say, it's not as simple as Councillor Fata outlined it in his comments. So do we have any other comments on this motion? So it just goes with the bylaws, actually. So when we pass the bylaws, we'll deal with it then. If we can, council, move to 7.1.1, the update on municipal transient accommodation tax. The CAO has a report on. Do we have any questions of the CAO? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, I think it's spelled out pretty well in the report, but perhaps worth noting publicly. The transient accommodation tax will replace, in essence, the destination marketing fee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, it's not a replacement per se. It's where there is a DMF in place. This tax is going to be put in. If there's a DMF in place, the entities that run it, the not-for-profit, could still do a DMF, a destination marketing fee, but of course they're not going to do it if it is that they get provided funding in full to the amount they're getting for the destination marketing fee.
Right. So
this will take the place of the destination marketing fee.
Yes. I guess in our case, those destinations have determined that they'll wind up the destination marketing fee at the same time that we implement this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that is correct, and it states that in the report.
And are the folks that are currently part of the destination marketing fee group, they're in support of this transient accommodation tax?
Yeah, can I speak to that? Because I've spent quite a bit of time with the people. So not all of our hoteliers and our moteliers contribute to that fund right now. but a number of them do, and a number of the big operators do. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking to them and making sure that we were doing this in such a manner that they would be agreeable to. And it's very clear that they want input in this process. You'll see in the report that when we come back to council with the final agreements, it's conceived that they will have input in that process. So to say they're agreeable, I think, in principle, provided that it ends up where they think it should end up. But we still have some work to do to work that out because it's a bit of a tripartite arrangement, because we have the EDC, who has Tourism Sault Ste. Marie, who will receive those funds. And then we have to figure out the mechanism by which we solicit and include our accommodation partners. So that's something that we're working on. And obviously, when it comes back to council for approval, it'll come back with, you're authorizing staff to move ahead and implement it, but we still have to do quite a bit of work to get there. So when it comes back, we would have those agreements. And presumably when we have those agreements, the goal is to come to a consensus vis-a-vis the city, the EDC, and our accommodation partners, so everybody's happy with how we're going to move forward. Because frankly, we want everybody's buy-in, because we believe we have a tremendous community and we can make a tremendous investment in tourism. And if we have everybody working together and all the cylinders firing, and everybody paddling in the same direction, it'll be much better. So the goal is to reach a consensus that everybody's agreeable to. It's going to take us a little bit more time to do that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, just an add to that as well. That's why in the recommendation you'll see that it's looking at having myself, the EDC director, and others work in terms of the MOU, because that's our only mechanism right now between ourselves and EDC, the city, is that MOU. But we want to make sure that the other partners, that the tourism and the hoteliers, are going to be considered as part of it. So when we change the MOU, it's also considering that, and that's why we've asked for that in the recommendation.
Okay, yeah, that susses it out quite a bit. From the appendix, I can see, or it certainly appears to be, that our rate will be no higher, or kind of in line with many of our other comparable cities. Is that a fair?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. And will we keep an eye on this, presuming the MOUs get signed, to see if it needs tweaking in future years, if it needs to go down, if we're losing a competitive advantage, or whatever the case might be? We'll keep our finger on it to make sure that we're not placing our tourism industry at a competitive disadvantage.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, of course, and that would be part of the accountability frameworks that would be set up and reported back.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Hupinen and then Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Horstman, just a couple questions. When you're working on the report with the hoteliers, I'm wondering if we could ask for an accounting protocol, I guess, just so that we can see how much we're getting from the different hoteliers, and when do we get it, and where does it go, that type of thing, because I haven't seen any of that type of funding since I started council. But no, we won't. We won't see
you wouldn't
that.
have, because it's been voluntary to date.
Okay.
There was an agreement between the accommodation partners and the EDC, so they had an agreement independent of the city, and they were making those contributions voluntarily, and the EDC was holding those contributions and administering them, through Tourism Sault Ste. Marie.
Oh, okay. So that's why I haven't
been privy to that if you were over at the EDC on their board, or you should have been privy to it if you were over there on their board, but it's not something that we were participating in. The difference here is now we'll be levying a tax, so we'll be collecting that tax.
Okay.
So we will have to have those. The legislation actually requires you to have an accountability agreement in place,
Right.
because we're taking a tax and we're sending it back out.
Okay, so there could be
There will
okay,
be.
that's good. And I didn't see anything where it showed any exemptions, such as trailer sites or marinas or whatever. So I'm sure that will all come.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it does describe in the report, anything that's 29 days or less is a transient accommodation, but the exemptions are for the universities and the colleges. We're still trying to understand fully what that means, but
Okay,
that's
right.
an exemption that's been described in the new regulations.
Good, I think it's great. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A little bit of a preamble and then a couple of questions to our CFO, our treasurer, that she knows about that are coming. First of all, I just want for the public as well as our own council to acknowledge that Sault Ste. Marie has been a leader in setting up what was really a voluntary, as has been mentioned, destination marketing fee or destination management fee. The forerunner to it was first called Tourism Market Share Fund, and it was really initiated by Mr. Hilsinger, who's still with us this evening, as the Searchmont Market Share Program. And I remember it very well, Jim, and I came back to Sault in 1989, and quite frankly, as Mr. Hilsinger alluded to earlier tonight, he had an attraction called Searchmont Mountain, and he was paying for all the marketing, and there's something seemed to be not quite right about that. So we started out the first, I think it was $10 a room or something like that the hotels contributed to, and that was the very first market share program ever in the province, and it was led by Searchmont Market Share. And then we mirrored it through the non-winter months with the Agua Canyon Market Share program. So ironically, I stood at the podium with Bruce Strapp at this very council chambers on the other side in the early 90s asking council the day to match those private sector funds which were in those two market shares, which at the time was only $68,500. But boy, we thought we had the world by the tail. Hey, Jim, that was a lot of money then. A couple of years later, the Tourism Marketing Partners Partnership actually was formed as a fund, and the accommodation sector came forward with another $100,000 that was raised voluntarily. So we had a total of $168,500. And again, Bruce and I came back to the council the day, and Steve, I think you may have been mayor at the time, and we asked that those funds be matched. Those two programs were matched by the city. So to this day, remaining in our budget to this very day is $168,656 that appears as a line item in our budget. And it was a very, very important statement of support to the local tourism industry. So my question that I raised with our treasurer is that to say that currently in our city's core operating budget, this fund, the $168,656, comes from the levy, correct? So it would be raised through taxes as part of our annual operating budget? Through you to Shelley Shells, Acting Mayor.
Through you, Ms. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Myers, you are correct. It is currently part of our operating levy.
So where I'm going with this is my subsequent question is, as we move forward with the new 4% tourism tax, that's an annual tax that's the same all over the province of Ontario for those who will be participating in that, $760,000 is what's, I believe, raised pretty much annually now by the DMF. And we've committed, in the report it refers to, we've committed to transfer that same amount at the minimum to the Tourism Sault Ste. Marie Division. There's supposedly going to be a surplus beyond that of maybe close to $500,000, about $475,000 if we go at the 4% with all the accommodation, because there's about 84% compliance right now, so there's a section that aren't contributing right now. Also, it said in the report, there is a current $1.3 million in reserve tourism Sault Ste. Marie. And where I'm going with this, councils, I won't be here at budget time, and I'll hand this off to those of you who will be here at budget time for next year, that I think that through that surplus, we could fund the $168,656 out of that new revenue stream. It does not have to come out of the residential levy anymore. And so there's your first $168,000 to reduce the taxes next year that we all pay. So that amount can now be paid through the annual 4%. So that's where I wanted to raise, Mr. CAO, when you go forward with the MOU, I think you really need to think about that piece. And I did check with Shelley Shell. That would be an option. Ms. Shell, am I correct that we could go that route to source that and reduce that out of the levy?
To you, Ms. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Myers, if Council so directs, and if this funding does continue for tourism, it can be provided from the new tax and removed from the levy. That's correct. So
that's my point. I mean, I'm intimately familiar with this because I was here at the beginning when we asked for the funds. I'm here now. This was my resolution with Councillor Hollings for seconding it to bring this all forward in the first place on the tourism tax. So I really think that council needs to take this opportunity to reduce the taxes by at least $168,656 going forward, and I leave that with you. It's my legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Nero is next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Acting Mayor. I guess my question to Mr. Horstman. Mr. Horstman, I'm looking at the recommendations, the third paragraph. And it speaks to using the net MAT revenue for promotion of tourism, including product development. And once the MOU is finalized and we sort out how this is going to be done and the groups involved, council won't have the option come budget time to decide what they want to do with that 475 every budget. The MOU is going to direct this committee of the partners to decide where that money is going to go, correct?
Through you, Ms. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Nero, that will be something that we would have council weigh in on. Right, as the current regulation states, we must keep whole the annual amount that had been collected under the destination marketing fee, so the 760,000. That 475,000 could, as a result of the discussions through the MOU, all go to EDC. Again, because it's for the purpose of promoting tourism. It could be retained by the city for activities as long as it's promoting tourism. So there is that avenue that needs to be discussed as part of the discussions with the various partners going forward as to what the full amount is going to be used for and how.
So would you expect that the MOU would tie a council decision for any amount of time, like the term of council, or is it open every year to decide what to do with the 475?
Through you, Ms. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Nero, it would again be what's decided with the partners in terms of what is going to be done, because they'll have their strategic plans internally and they'll be working through tourism, SSM, and EDC as part of their agreement there. Our MOU would just be for how we're flowing the 760 to them, and to make sure that there's accountability agreements in place that it's being used for the promotion of tourism.
Promotion term, and this recommendation tonight, approving this recommendation tonight, does that. It ties the net amount after the payment that was ongoing for the years. It ties it to tourism. There have been, and I'm asking that question specifically because other councils and other municipalities that have had this discussion about what to do with the excess funds after the payment has been done. Some councils have opted to use it on road reconstruction and just general operations. But we're deciding that we want it to go specifically to tourism, correct?
The intention of the regulation is it's for the promotion of tourism. So other communities such as Kingston, for example, what they did there is they said 60% would go to the accommodation partners in the local tourism to keep them whole from the previous years.
Yeah.
But the remaining amount was put into a reserve held by the city for infrastructure that was related to promotion of tourism. So
I've heard some justifications of using money for tourism that was tied to general operations that was already coming out of general funds. And you know, how many tourists use our roads? How many tourists use these facilities? So
through you,
we're not doing that. And that's
through you,
what I
Acting Mayor,
sure.
to Councillor Nero, no, we are not intending on doing that. We'll be bringing to council things that we can clearly identify as
tourism.
promotion
That's
of
what I
tourism.
want to make sure of. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Nero. We have Councillor Christian next, and then Councillor Fada, and then we have Councillor Byers.
She was asked.
Yeah, okay. And Councillor Fada?
Ms. Acting Mayor, I'll apologize in advance if I'm oversimplifying something once again. I'm looking at the fact that the DMF fund has a reserve of 1.3 million, and that is based on a 3% voluntary contribution. And I'm also keeping in mind the fact that we are a border city, unlike North Bay, Sudbury, Kingston, and so forth, which I think should affect how we deal with this. We're playing follow the leader here with this 4% figure. I'm wondering, Mr. CAO, if this 4% has to be something that we have to work with. Can we look at that and say, wait a minute, 1.3 million reserve based on a 3% voluntary. What about if we do the math based on 3% where you must pay? Are we not going to have fair amount of revenue coming in where we look at perhaps something less than 4%, be it 3% or whatever. Based on the history, it seems like we can entertain something other than 4%.
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, to Councillor Fata. Again, this was in consultation with other communities. They're all going with the 4%. This was in consultation with the accommodation partners. This was in consultation with Tourism SSM and in consultation with EDC. So we are recommending the 4%. As was indicated earlier to Councillor Shoemaker, of course, in terms of as things progress and as we see how this may or may not impact in terms of attendance at hotels, we certainly would expect that that's going to come back for a consideration of a change to that amount. But right now, the recommended amount is the 4%, which allows for the collection of funds to be able to promote the tourism activities that have been discussed in meetings to date, and that would be discussed as part of the agreements going forward, including the MOU.
So the option then of something other than 4% will not be entertained?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Fata, again, the recommendation before Council right now is 4%.
Yeah. There's if I may, there was a recent example of someone that came over here. They were going to stay here. They were going to spend some time here. They came here. They looked at our gas prices. They says, forget it. They went across the river. They gassed up, and they stayed there at the hotel across the river. This is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with when we're on a border city. We have to keep in mind our location. And I don't care about what Kingston and Timmins and Sudbury and North Bay are doing. We are a border city, and that plays a huge role, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Fata. Now, Councillor Bruni.
Ms. Acting Mayor, I guess my question to Mr. Horstman regarding we're eliminating the 3% DMF and we're increasing the 4%. Any thought in keeping it at 3%? Like, are we just following trend from other cities?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Acting Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Again, this was in consultation with many of the partners, the accommodation partners, with the EDC, with tourism, and with the city administration, and that was the amount that was identified, not only because it's consistent with what's being done in other communities, but also because of its opportunity for being able to invest into tourism promotion activities.
Okay, and just to follow up, we have right now 84% participate in the DMF. Do we have concerns that it might be reduced?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the 84% was relating to the destination marketing fee. So of the hotels or short-term accommodation, only 84% were participating in that. That's the figure we got from EDC. So now the tax will be applied to a broader swath. It'll be 100. It's no longer voluntary. It's a tax that's applied.
Mandatory. Okay.
Mandatory.
All right.
Okay, before I come back to you, Councillor Myers, is there anybody else who wants to speak on it? Councillor Myers, if we can just close this up.
I just wanted to address for a moment, I got in touch with Linda Hoth, who's the director of the Convention and Visitor Bureau of Sault, Michigan. I've known her for many years, because when I first came out to the Sault in '89, they had a 2% accommodation tax. We didn't have anything at all. And that was their marketing budget. They had $250,000 annual marketing budget. Mine was about $80,000 at the time. They have moved to 5% accommodation tax in Sault, Michigan a few years ago, and they now raise $750,000 for their marketing through their accommodation tax. So I just wanted to clarify that because, Councillor Fata, I heard what you were saying around the competition, and that's the issue. They have a 5% accommodation tax, and ours will still only be 4%. So I think that's a really critical point to make. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Oh, sorry. We have the motion read, please.
Got a motion by Councillors Myers and Bruni. Resolved that the Corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie implement a municipal transient accommodation tax effective January 1, 2019, consistent with the requirements prescribed under Ontario Regulation 435-17, transient accommodation tax, and further that the Chief Administrative Officer, Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer, Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services, and Sault Ste. Marie EDC Executive Director develop the framework to administer and implement the tax. Further, that an advisory committee consisting of city staff, Sault Ste. Marie EDC staff, and representatives from the accommodation partners report back for council approval prior to actual allocation of the tax revenue in 2019 with a revised city Sault Ste. Marie EDC MOU to reflect the use of the tax revenue for promotion of tourism, including product development. And further, that the revised city EDC MOU include a provision for affected short-term accommodation stakeholders to have input on use of the funds to promote tourism.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 7.3.1, GFL Memorial Gardens private management. A motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fata resolved that the report of the Director, Community Services, Community Development and Enterprise Services dated August 13, 2018 be received and the recommendation to continue to operate the GFL Memorial Gardens by city staff be approved.
Any questions on this report? All in favor? Oh, sorry, you guys, I didn't see any, so Councillor Shoemaker.
I was just trying to find the appendix here that had the, or maybe it was in the report itself, the losses over the last 7 or 8 years. Some of them pretty staggering. Am I, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Michelle, am I correct in saying that last year the loss was somewhere in the range of $750,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, that is the budgeted deficit to run the arena, and my understanding not all the administration is included in that number either.
Okay, and so when there's another report on here, I think, that talks about a surplus in the operations because of the long playoff run that the Greyhounds had. Are we talking a surplus from the budgeted loss, or are we talking an actual dollar surplus above break even?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Shoemaker, that would be a, pardon me, that's a positive variance in the budget, sorry.
A positive variance, yes, that's the term that's the term that's used in there, but what does that mean in plain English?
It means they will come in under budget. So
Right.
what the expenses are showing in the budget that reflects a total deficit, it will be under that.
Right, so instead of a $650,000 deficit, it'd be a $550,000 deficit.
Correct.
Okay, that's not terribly reassuring. So, you know, I understand that the, you know, that there's been this PricewaterhouseCoopers report from a number of years back, and that the recommendation is to sort of remain status quo because there's risks to either way of doing things, but I just can't see continuing to just budget for a $650,000 loss every year and accept that it might be $750,000 some years and accept that it might only be $550,000 in other years. It's just, I mean, it actually makes me question, when I was reading this report, it makes me question whether or not we can afford another rink at all, you know, another West End rink or another rink elsewhere in the city. Numbers like this make me think we need to rethink how we're operating these facilities, because it's just unacceptable. I mean, it's not, you know, I realize that there's a public service to be provided, but you have to balance that with being able to provide public services across the board. And when you have one public service, which is ice for hockey and for curling and other activities, figure skating, etc., you have to balance it with being able to provide other services, and some other services might not be quite as costly. So that's, I certainly won't support this, and I guess I'll probably ask for a recorded vote on the motion.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Tom Vare. First of all, I agree with your comments, Councillor Shoemaker. Very clear. Thank you. When I read this, I did some research for myself, and so here are some questions. You mentioned, I believe in your report, that you looked at other Ontario cities that once had their centres managed privately, and then they went back to being managed by the city. Is that correct? And I think the cities you looked at were, for example, Sudbury, and what were some of the other cities that you looked at?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm just finding that in the report. Just a reference, Brent Lamming and team was the author on this report, but we did work together on the report to provide the information to council.
Okay, sorry.
The arenas that we referenced in the report, yes, were the city of Guelph and the city of Sarnia that had gone under private management, and both those arenas have returned to operating the venues through city staff.
Okay. So my other question is, when this report was written, did anyone look at any other cities outside of Ontario that were similar to us in size and potentially location, being more rural?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, no, we did focus on other communities in Ontario.
And out of curiosity, why just Ontario? Why didn't you look outside of Ontario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I think it was to find representative communities in our jurisdiction. Also, there's a practical aspect of how many communities we're going to go out and research and find information on. So we thought we would start with Ontario and provide a snapshot of what other communities in Ontario are doing.
Okay. When I was reading your report, and it did tweak an interest of looking at some private, potential private companies, did you look or talk to any private management firms to help you with the pros of going out to a private firm? Did you actually speak to any other private management firms that could help you come up with the pros?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I don't believe we did speak to the private management firms. We did rely on the previous reports that were done by external consultants on this topic for us, and they had provided pros and cons with private sector management that we incorporated into the report.
Okay, and as Councillor Shoemaker referred to, PricewaterhouseCoopers, I think, was one of the consultants. Again, how long ago was that report written?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, the PwC report was January 2014.
Okay. Can I make comments at this time?
No, we're gonna continue on with questions right now, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Okay.
Councillor Myers. We have Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to Mr. Fair, regarding the total days in 2016, we were at 83, and then 2017 we dropped to 78. Correct? That's the second last appendix. So my question is, why the decrease? I know it's only 5 days, but it's obviously revenue. And
yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, it is often a factor of the Greyhound games stay consistent typically between the different seasons, but when you're looking at different conventions or special events in the community and the length of those different events, the number of concerts, et cetera, that would drive the difference in the days.
yeah, but the Greyhound games increased in 2017 to 45, 5 extra games. So if you even take those 5 games out, you're at 73. So you're looking at 10 days less. That's it. I guess it's a question / comment. It seems like the use is less this year than it was.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I would say that all of these items are somewhat related to, you know, who's touring, what events are taking place as these artists come through. It also has a bearing on the economics in the community, and if you're selling out shows, you will attract more concerts to your community. If you're not selling out shows, you attract less events to the community. The staff have been working proactively to look at how we can create more events at the GFL Memorial Gardens. We've recently started up an advisory group to look at how we can attract more concerts to the facility, and working with EDC to look at other conventions and sporting events that can take place at the facility. all these things factor into the number of days that we have booked at the facility for those types of events.
You said they formed a committee. Who would be involved in that committee? I'm sorry to ask you. I mean, you might not know who's on this committee. Is this businesses? Is it just staff?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. These are businesses in the community and folks with an interest in arts and concert field.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. I see City of Guelph, City of Sarnia, Belleville. These are all communities, for the most part, much larger than Sault Ste. Marie, with surrounding communities supporting them, and they have reverted back to city operations. You've listed them, but are there specific reasons in doing your research as to why they've done that, to kind of frame, put a finer point on your recommendations? Why did they revert back specifically, if you have that information?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. Some of the work that we did, I guess not to get into specifics, but in certain cases it was an opportunity to, they wanted to take back control of the facility for reasons such as the maintenance of the facility and how the equipment was maintained. Other communities looked at the costs that the facility was charging to host events and the revenue they were getting back from that. Typically, it did boil down to, though, being able to control the facility and be able to drive and make the decisions on how the facility would operate and charge fees to the customers. I think, as the report indicates here, you know, there's only so many levers you have in terms of the fees that you're generating from the facility. In our case, we have an agreement with the Sioux Greyhounds, the OHL organization, that lasts another 8 years, 2025-26 season. You look at the rental of the ice rates, what you charge for the facility, and you look at the different ways you drive revenue through concessions and the number of concert events that you host in your facility. So all of that to say that you know, we're working on how we can improve those revenue numbers and how we can adjust those things. In the case of those other communities, they felt they would be able to do a better job and perform a better service by bringing it back in-house.
Thank you.
Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a new topic, Councillor Shoemaker. It's brought up a few times, the look at privatization of the Memorial Gardens back in the early 2000s to what we're doing now. I wonder if I can get Mr. Santa Maria, the manager, on the microphone.
Well, looks like you can.
There you go. And Rob, thank you very much. I've seen a few managers over the years.
Yes.
At the Memorial Gardens / SR Center, Steelback Center, and now the GFL Memorial Gardens. What would it mean? How many employees do we have right now at the Memorial Gardens?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco. Right now we have 8 full-time, which are divided up into 5 management and 3 union, and 2 other part-time.
To you, Mr. Mayor, would that include anybody at John Rhodes, or do you
No,
work together?
that would be for the GFL Gardens.
Just that particular building on
Correct,
Queen Street. Yeah. And what would it mean then, to you, Mr. Mayor, what would it, Rob, if we did go to private operator? What would it mean to these employees? Would they be guaranteed the job, or would they?
No, we'd have to either try to redeploy, or in some instances we wouldn't be able to. We'd have to terminate.
Terminate. And has anybody brought it up to you, Rob, that we could operate better, or any suggestions from the staff going forward with you know, keeping what we have right now?
Well, we've actually we actually do a little bit of work in other different areas. Myself, the events assistant who actually is doing a lot of stuff with ice scheduling for all the centers itself. We've created that event development fund that we can actually help to try to promote some other concerts. We've taken some input from them. I think right now we're looking at every visible way of trying to get, together with the tourism or EDC to go ahead and try to, look for more events.
You're looking at other opportunities to
correct, yeah,
raise that profit line. Thank you, Rob. And Mr. Mayor, if I could just, I've heard this before, and this is one of those services, this is my comment too, if you don't mind, if you like.
You just go ahead. You've said very little tonight, Councilor Turco. Yeah.
Go around the table, but I'll be short and sweet. This is one of those services. A little while ago, we were talking about tourism, and if it wasn't for our building on Queen Street there, I'm not sure where we'd be here in Sault Ste. Marie. I haven't heard anything but positive comments over the years about the SR Center, Memorial Gardens, and if we change the way we're doing business at that place, it would be a sad day for Sault Ste. Marie.
Councilor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was my resolution. I brought it forward in February, as is included in the report, and Councillor Shoemaker spoke first about this tonight, but I had it right in the resolution that for the last 5 years we've averaged $437,585.76 loss, and we were budgeted to lose $626,890 in 2018. Thankfully, because of the success of the Greyhounds, we're only going to lose $550,000, or 150 less from $626,890. Mr. Mayor, this is just, I know I'm leaving council, but this is totally unacceptable to me. I have brought it up different times over the 12 years. It's a very thorough and informative report. And this has been, in my view, the most thorough and informative report we've had in the 12 years. And it's clear to me that our geographic location and the correlation of any real comparison with any other similar sized city arena is just not possible. It really isn't actually possible. While I like the Kingston model, and on the surface it appears to be a good deal for the municipality, I'm not sure we could enjoy the same degree of success. Perhaps if our location was halfway between Ottawa and Toronto on the 401, it would behoove us to look at privatization, as we would have a more lucrative opportunity to woo a private management company. Further, it's clear to me that our multi-purpose event centre really is not so much multi-purpose after all. Rather, it's a primary purpose of only real opportunity to ever break even is completely dependent upon the success of our OHL team. It's very, very important for members of council and the public to take note what is stated in the report. The success of the Sioux Greyhounds this year meant a difference of $150,000, which maybe doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot better than losing the $600 and some odd thousand dollars. And it's carried by all of us, this deficit. It's carried through our levy, and it's so disturbing to all of us, I'm sure. We need to have a major event center. We don't have an option. We have to have a major event center in our community. The tourism industry will tell you that it's essential when you're seeking to bid for major events like Carha. So I'm going to throw this out again. Another thing, Mr. CAO, for you to park somewhere. I'd urge council going forward to consider carving out some of the surplus revenue from the newly to be implemented accommodation tax to at least soften the blow. Because if you do that, you will soon hear from tourism whether they believe we do need this major event center or not. Tourism was part of it at the beginning. Tourism raised $500,000 to go towards the marketing when we were building the now GFL Memorial Gardens, and they do believe they need it as an entity in our community. So I think that, again, we have to go back towards, we cannot keep expecting, this is growing, this isn't going down. We have a year where the Greyhounds did well, great, is lesser, but we still averaged $437,000 in the last 5 years, and now we're only down to $550,000 loss for 2018. So I really, really urge council going forward to take a look at this. I'm not going to vote against the report because I think, and the recommendation to carry on, because I do think that the solutions have to lie within ourselves. The solutions have to lie within our own city approach to the city-owned facility. We have great successes in other part of our operations, and it's a micro comparison, but the Ermitanger and Cleric National Historic Site, they do a bang-up job. They work real hard. They don't put on events where they're going to lose money. They've been working very hard at one this week that everyone's aware of. So on a bigger picture, we've got to find a way of dealing with this deficit. End of story. We have to. We cannot just sit here and shrug our shoulders and accept that year after year, we all pay taxes too, are going to accept $500,000 in excess of loss. We can't. We can't do it. It's not going to go down. So I realize the little efforts that are being made, and it's like, well, we'll talk to tourism, see if they can do more for us and so on. We are not in the marketing business. We aren't. That's not what we do. We operate great facilities, and our staff do an awesome job. The place is well kept up. It's clean. Rob, the food's great. Love eating there before a game and so on. We're not marketing people. I do think staff could still take a look at engaging an agency of record to become the marketer for us. You don't have to hand off the keys and have it privatized, but you've got to get marketing experts in there to do something to fill this place. It's just unacceptable. There's so many dark days. And truthfully, if I was going to be here going forward, I'd be bringing a resolution saying, you know what, if you can't do that, then we need to shut it down for the parts of the year when it's so dark, because it's costing us money to be there every day. So I leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, if we can draw this to a close, Councillor Hollingsworth, you spoke to it, but if you can make your comments brief, please.
Yeah, I do have comments. We are losing money on this, and basically doing research, there is actually a city that is similar to us in population. There's Brossard, Quebec. Their population is 85,000 people. And they have hired, for many years, a private company to manage their facilities. They hired actually a company called Can Land Ice Sports. They have been around since 1956. They're the leader in North America for managing places like ours. They have managed places in Etobicoke, Oakville, Oshawa, Markham, York University, and they're a publicly traded company. They also have gone in to work with communities to continue to use the existing employees. They are basically the leader in ice sports, as I mentioned, facility operations, programming. They basically offer different branded programs from leagues, skating, hockey academies, and camps, tournaments for adults and kids. Their goal is to create an experience that benefits the customers, partners, and community. They are the world leaders in ice sports facility ownership and operations, plus management. I just want to also bring to your attention that they manage 20 facilities in Canada. They manage 70 facilities in the United States. They offer branded programs which include youth 3-on-3 hockey leagues, Can-Am Classic tournaments, hockey and skate academies, as I mentioned. But they also are one of the premier brands in Adult Safe Hockey League, the world's largest adult recreation hockey league with over 65,000 members, which also they operate the restaurants. They offer sports stores. So when the hockey players are going in, they actually can buy hockey equipment, not to put down our local merchants. But what I'm trying to say is, to almost Councillor Meyer's point, why don't we reach out to some of these experts and ask them to work with us and say, this is our situation. Maybe we can hire them as consultants even. They're willing to talk to us, and they're located in Burnaby, BC. This is not new to them, and there's other communities that are using them, that are successful, that are getting a percentage of the revenue. So that's why I was asking those questions earlier to Mr. Vare. Have you talked to any other management company to come up with pros? So honestly, I have to say, I agree with Councillor Shoemaker and Myers. It's time to stop the leak of this revenue. We have a great facility, a great community, and excellent staff, yes, but why not talk to a company like this that's been in the business since 1956 around North America, who is making money for the communities? Thank you.
Councillor Butland.
Yes, I just have to. I agree with Councillor Turco. To say that this is not a success, we get nothing. I personally get nothing but reviews from people from outside the community saying, your facility, we wish we had one like yours. This is one time where we always say, we got a great location here. A location for concerts and those like. Sault Ste. Marie is not we're not on the route, their natural route. You have to go out of their way, which makes it more expensive for them to come here, so they want a much better cut. So it's difficult. I think it is a first-class operation. It's a service we provide and ask the people around the facility. Restaurants, are you happy? I think you'd say yes. I would agree with Councillor Myers. We don't have to farm out the whole system. Can we not consult, bring one person on and say, this is your sole role. This is your job. Market it and see what you can do in a year and see if it's successful or not. And the proof will be in the pudding. The judge after a year or give it 2 years. But I don't think we're ever going to stop that bleeding. To say, well, Guelph did this and London, well, you drive 100 miles and you've got another community twice your size. They're all there's a population there. And here we drive to Sudbury for the next large city. So it's at our detriment as much as it can be a positive in some of the things we do. But the bus system loses a lot of money. We can't afford that. We should shut it down. Anything that loses money, we just can't afford it anymore. You're darn right we can, and we have to. And let's, again, celebrate what we've done. It's a good thing. Thank you.
So listen, we're going to vote in a second. I'll just say this. I agree with the sentiment that we have to do better. Like the center should not lose what the center's losing. I have talked to the CEO about that. I've talked to the deputy CEO about that. I haven't talked to Mr. Lamming about it, but I know the deputy CEO has talked to Mr. Lamming about it. And we've talked to Mr. Santamaria about it. My feeling is if we give this team a year to work at this, they'll do better. And if they don't do better next year, I think we have a legitimate conversation about what we do on a going forward basis. I personally believe that there will be a loss at the event center or at our rinks, on a year-over-year basis, because they are a community service. The question is, what's a reasonable loss, and what we are comfortable with? What I've heard tonight, and what I want staff to take away from this meeting, is that this council is not comfortable with the loss as it is. So we have to look at what we can do to close that gap and make sure that whatever we're investing in the building over a fiscal year, right? Whether it's 200 or 250 or 150 or 100, we have to land on what we think is acceptable to provide what Councillor Shoemaker points out, Councillor Butland pointed out, is a community service. So we're not there. It's very clear, but we have to get there. And I think you're going to see a lot of work over the next year by the staff sitting around this table to close that gap. And I'm confident next year we'll be in a better place than we are this year. And I think this is a really important conversation to have next year if we are not. All in favor of staff recommendation? Or recorded vote, sorry. There's a recorded vote. Yeah?
This option of privatizing gone?
No. No. They're going to proceed to run the GFL Memorial Gardens as we always have, and that'll be through next budget cycle. But if at next budget cycle we're seeing the same thing, you can be sure to be free to talk about it again. It doesn't close this off forever, no. But if you were trying to bring a meeting at the next council, you couldn't bring a motion at the next council meeting. That would be a reconsideration. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Butland?
I'm sorry.
You're for.
4.
Councillor Myers?
4.
Councillor Bruni?
4.
Councillor Nero?
4.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Against.
Councillor Grandinetti?
4.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Against.
Councillor Hupinen?
4.
Councillor Christian?
4.
Councillor Fada?
Against.
Councillor Turco?
4.
Mayor Provenzano?
4.
Motion passes.
So, Madam Clerk, that brings us to the bylaws.
Bylaws?
Yeah. So you have to separate the bylaw.
Got one note, yeah.
Well, 11.1.5. So the rest of the bylaws can go together. Oh, no, except for the conflicted ones.
A motion by Councillors Myers and Fata resolved that all bylaws listed under item 11 of the agenda under date August 13, 2018, save and except bylaw 2018-168 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And resolved that bylaw 2018-168 being a bylaw to authorize the sale of surplus property being 13 Salisbury Avenue to the Lighthouse First Nations Church and to repeal bylaw 2017-58.
All in favor? Carried.
And I have a motion by Councillors Myers and Bruni resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss an issue under the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
Motion by Councillors Myers and Fata that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.